one's the best crypto asset? Bitcoin's the best crypto asset. Which one's the best crypto asset? Bitcoin's the best crypto asset. Which one's the best? 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 What's the second best?
See, Discover Crypto. I'm DZ's uglier brother, Drew, and we are going live. Sergey from Chainlink about to speak at the Federal Reserve, folks. We are covering this live for you. Let's have a listen to what's happening in front of the Federal Reserve governors right now with crypto. Let's go. Good morning.
More than $5 trillion of worth of digital asset value that is going to be transferred. And with regards to DeFi, among kind of the category of the different wallets.
Let me know in the chat if the sound is working for you as well. One in chat if the sound's working.
I hear it. We were the first one that created an offering back in 2020 to interact with various DeFi protocols. And along the way, we basically kind of were helping with the challenge that the traditional financial institutions and regulated entities have in terms of accessing DeFi. So I think we have a lot of experience in discussing about the topic we're going to chat about today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Barker. I lead two businesses for BNY. I lead the Treasury Services business, and I lead the Depository Receipts business. And first, I'd like to thank Governor Waller for bringing us here today and the rest of the Federal Reserve. This is a really important topic, and the discussion is timely. We're at a really unique and extraordinary juncture. We have breakthroughs in distributed ledgers, tokenized assets, artificial intelligence, all of which are reshaping the payments industry, not only here, but across the globe. And these technologies, they promise payments that are faster, more secure, and more inclusive than ever before. But traditional services and traditional service providers still provide scale and regulatory standards and expertise that underpins every transaction. So today's shift isn't about blockchain technology immediately replacing traditional systems. It's about the two coexisting, and that's really where true transformation lies, on getting those networks to interconnect. So our task is to unite these strengths as they complement one another. Layering digital asset innovation onto proven financial systems will unlock greater efficiency, liquidity, transparency, security, and financial inclusion. Key tenets here are important to resolving delivery around real-time payments, data-rich payments, and modernizing for resiliency, security, and industry collaboration. So success will depend on the close collaboration amongst all of us, banks, fintechs, service providers, regulators, to build clear standards, resilient infrastructure, and responsible risk frameworks. So at BNY, we are committed to innovating by investing deeply in research, modernizing our infrastructure, and championing clear, adaptable frameworks that encourage responsible innovation.
Okay, great. So now we'll jump into it. As you could hear from everybody's introductions, obviously infrastructure and the technology itself is really the critically important part. So we're going to really try to delve deep a little bit on the technology to start. And we're going to start with the question of interoperability, which means the ability for various computer and software systems to share data and make use of it across different systems. Sergey, we'll kick off with you, because obviously interoperability is key to what Chainlink has built. They've built the Cross-Chain Interoperability Protocol, or CCIP, which is software that allows users to provide information across various different blockchain networks, so Ethereum, Solana, and many others. But how is CCIP currently being used, and you alluded to this a little bit in your introduction, by traditional financial services firms who are integrating digital assets into their offerings?
It is. I can't believe they're talking CCIP at the Fed.
Can't seem to get that right.
I'm a full-service moderator.
I wouldn't last long at the Fed. I can't even get this right. Yeah, so there's like two dimensions to interoperability in the TradFi world because of the existing investment in systems. So the first level of interoperability is getting the existing systems to work with chains, the existing data sources, the existing backend systems, the existing messaging standards such as SWIFT. all of these existing systems need to become synchronized. And this is where you hear terms like digital twin and fund tokenization and other areas. So there's one level of problems where you have to synchronize existing data, existing backends, existing messaging standards with the chains, right, for basic operations. And our position is that those existing systems are not going to be going away. There's a huge investment in them. They're highly regulated. They meet legal requirements. They meet a lot of very key requirements. So the challenge there is synchronizing them. This is the work we've done with SWIFT, the DDCC, and other groups that power those systems in big ways. The second level of interoperability is the cross-chain level, and that's because you have a lot of fragmentation, and that's happening because the cost of generating a chain is becoming lower and lower. So as the cost of generating a chain is cheaper, and as it's easier and easier for more institutions to make chains, there will be more chains. Also, there's various fee dynamics and other benefits to having your own chain. And there's also more and more public chains as long as VCs can make money from flipping a public blockchain coin. So as long as VCs can fund a public blockchain coin, and as long as that public blockchain coin can return a large amount of capital to them as a result of their initial investment, you can expect more public chains as well, because that's a very financially attractive business model for many people. So there's more chains. More chains creates siloed capital. Siloed capital creates risk and creates limitations to market growth. So you need standards, you need standardized ways to synchronize the existing systems and to synchronize the chains as they grow in amount and fragmentation. So that's what we have a lot of experience with. One of the main challenges that we found in working on that, different from doing it in the DeFi community, doing it in the capital markets community, is there's a lot of requirements around compliance. There's a lot of requirements around accounting, books and records, and all these different requirements that a transaction has. So the challenge in the capital markets with interoperability is not just connecting two systems, whether they're an existing system to a chain or whether it's a chain to another chain. It's getting the connection to result in a transaction that meets the books and records requirements, that meets the compliance requirements, and that meets whatever other requirements the regulator or the counterparties may have from the transaction, right? So that's the challenging thing, really, is making the transaction actually happen against all of those, accounting, compliance, identity, regulatory requirements. I'm really thrilled to see events like this. I'm really thrilled about the SEC's new direction and the CFTC's upcoming direction, because that'll simplify that problem. But there will be a period of probably 2 to 5 years where you have to create a kind of hybrid system where the old requirements through the old systems still need to be met, but the new system needs to meet them. So that is kind of the challenging thing for transactions, I would say, in the next 2 to 5 year period, that are interoperable in the senses that I described.
Makes sense. Jackie, and my questions go down the line, but I didn't know the way we were going to sit. So, but do you think that the banking system can actually just to turn this question a little on its head, can the banking system manage the fragmentation of all of these chains that Sergey was alluding to? And how does the technology need to evolve from the digital asset side to be able to be used by banks and traditional financial services firms?
Yeah, well, I'd say in listening to that, it actually sounded like the banking system. And so I laughed in the back of my head as I was listening to this idea of extreme fragmentation, siloing, and the need to actually do compliance. That sounds eerily familiar as someone who owns a bank. But I think today, the banking system is not at all ready for it. Like, you have 2 banks represented here. Like, we're probably one of the biggest infrastructure banks in the US that deals with crypto and stablecoins, and Bank of New York is certainly one of the largest institutions that's like the gold standard for holding reserves and managing the crypto industry. And so you probably have
They're
2 of
uncomfortable.
like 10, I would say. Having said that, there's a bunch of things that banks have to deal with that I think are probably the most likely use cases to hit banks at first. One is wallets, and that's consumer-related wallets. The second is infrastructure. I think on the infrastructure side, you're seeing that evolve today and that's infrastructure of dealing with BIN sponsorship, moving money, storing money, and kind of the overall management of on-ramps and off-ramps. And I think that infrastructure has actually been established by players and operates quite well within the system today. I know we work with over 150 plus crypto companies, hundreds of accounts, tens of billions of dollars of money that flows through on a fairly regular basis. That happens very fluidly following all the KYC rules that are required and all of the institutional knowledge that we've had for 90 years of developing a banking system in the United States around like core banking law. So that exists today. On the consumer wallet side, I'd say that's probably the least sophisticated and I don't actually see like a use case today for like stable coins and consumer wallets. No one is sitting there going, I'm going to use my $25 worth of stable coin at Starbucks. Like that kind of, it's
do
a
that all the
nice
time.
theory, but I don't actually see any
That's what they're afraid
transaction
of.
volume that's happening on the consumer side.
That's true. There's
Where
not
you're
a ton
gonna
of volume
see
there
it, though,
yet.
is institutions that have moved their infrastructure, and over time, it'll become more prevalent as banks adopt stablecoin wallets, most likely through their core providers like Fiserv, Jack Henry, and FIS, who
Told
will
you banks were
enable
gonna
it
do
so that you
DeFi.
could have interoperability between crypto companies, fintech companies, and core financial services. And so those wallets will be onboarded probably within the next year or two by these companies who have been watching Genius Act. But those are the two more likely use cases for where it happens. And I think on the stablecoin infrastructure side, you won't really notice it as a consumer. It'll just happen in your payment devices. And those rails will start to get moved first by multinational payments and then second through more domestic payments, largely because the infrastructure has started to move over those rails if, and I say if, there's an advantage in terms of actual cost and speed versus theoretical cost and speed, because we also are having this intersection of FedNow, which is a 24/7, 365
Here
payment
come
rail
the
that
XRP,
actually
man.
works today. And so users could send a significant amount of money. Adoption isn't that great, but that actually does exist. And so big institutional users are going to debate which rail is actually
Tell
more
me you're scared
economically
without telling me you're
advantaged in
scared.
which to send money.
I'm gonna grab a drink.
Yeah.
Michael, I want to get to custody and wallet infrastructure in a second, but because of how Sergey teed things off, Jennifer, I'm actually going to ask you, so what liability, counterparty, and settlement finality issues emerge when you're bridging these open smart contract systems that DeFi is built on with these regulated banking systems? No, for you.
Oh, you.
Michael's coming
Are you?
in a second.
Sorry, I thought you said both of us.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very interesting question, right? Because you have the question of, an auditable chain and figuring out, and as you mentioned, Sergey, all of the data has to travel with that. So you have the question of finality and you have the question of revocability, right? And so on chain, things are final, but there also probably needs to be a
We want
revocable
control.
process, just like you have today with wires and other
Sergey
payment
should just
systems.
flip the
So I think
table
it's
over.
a really interesting question of, is it final on chain? Well, what is the process to really have it be revocable if needed?
You gotta
off
wonder
chain
what's
and
going
the
through his head
regulatory
listening to all
environment?
this.
Oh, that's very interesting because I mean, the whole point is for it not to be
Right.
revocable in many ways, although certain, obviously, stablecoin issuers are, I think, thinking about revocability. Okay, so to move to a different part of the infrastructure, but that is just as equally important, as you said, Fireblocks builds wallet infrastructure. And Michael, talk about how the custody broker approach today in traditional financial services contrasts with wallet infrastructure and sort of other digital asset technology, just
I
to set the
definitely want
stage. And then I,
digital ID.
of course, have a number of questions.
Yeah, so I think that first of all, when people think about custody, I think what they have in mind is either how banks used to have safes and they would basically store bare assets in those safes, or maybe like, the entire books and records, right, that currently exists in terms of some kind of like, tree that at the top level you have something like DTCC and then kind of propagates to the various intermediaries that are creating a hierarchy of sub-accounts. the reality is that actually that function in blockchain and crypto is actually provided by the blockchains themselves, by the L1s. They're the ones that are, that's kind of the books and records. And what you do as a custodian or as a wallet provider or basically the safekeeping element is actually storing the password, right? Storing the private key that is the instruction to move either an asset from one wallet to another or operate a smart contract on behalf of that account. So conceptually, it's a bit different. On top of it, unlike, I would say, like, you know, in the traditional space that, okay, there is basically one safe, right? You can actually operate much more sophisticated and improved mechanisms to increase the security, right? So instead of having, for example, one private key, one of the things that Fireblocks and a few other folks have built over the last couple of years is this concept of multi-signature or threshold signatures or multi-party computation, but essentially it's a virtual system that distributes the ownership over a wallet, right? So you need multiple parties to actually sign a transaction simultaneously to instruct the movement. And that creates like a much larger or much greater resiliency, right? From both a cybersecurity standpoint, counterparty risk standpoint, operational risk standpoint, compared to modes that you have in the traditional space. So that's kind of one important element that it's quite interesting to bring. I mean, it's actually nowadays when you look at all the crypto and fintech players, they all have adopted it. Also, in
Fireblocks
terms
is
of
a great
most
product,
of the
guys.
retail wallets, they've adopted it, and also I think the banks that have partnered with us, they have also adopted it. But generally speaking, every time that we do talk with bank, especially like, you know, bank IT, it is a fairly complex journey to get them think about how they can enhance their resiliency in that regard.
When he said bank IT,
By the
he
way,
could not
you know,
laugh.
that type of
He's like, their
technology
tech is
actually
so
proven
dated.
itself to over the last couple of years to prevent quite a lot of disastrous situations in
Like
terms
yesterday.
of theft in the crypto space. And I think that part of what we are working on right now is the regulators globally. And I think that the more exciting thing is that we now have the opportunity to work with the regulators in the United States, is to actually bring frameworks, right, similar to what you have in Europe, like DORA, to bring similar frameworks into the US that will help regulators and traditional financial institutions with scoping and understanding how to implement those models and make sure that as we build or embed those capabilities within the traditional space, we are doing it in a secure and safe way, because it's true, I think, like, you know, Jackie and kind of alluded to that, there is sort of a hump, right, that, and that's also been our experience working with some of our partners over here, is that there is actually a pretty significant effort that goes not actually in implementing the wallet infrastructure and the custody technology per se, but actually integrating it into the traditional systems. And it's not only integrating in the traditional systems, like just connecting those APIs, it's actually also to evolve the processes and the procedures and how IT is actually going to consume that within the bank. And the reality is, you probably won't be surprised, right, that most of the banks, whether they develop their core banking systems internally or they're using providers like the providers that were mentioned over here, those providers and those systems that were built in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, they're not really equipped to deal with it, not only on the level of you know, the fact that they're doing batch processing once a day, but actually even change management that sometimes expected to take weeks or months, right? You now have a situation that there is a fork on the Ethereum blockchain, and you need to update all your nodes to the fork, right? And you need to do it in the next 60 minutes. And if you're not going to do it in the next 60 minutes, you're going to be disconnected from the main ledger, right? So those processes, those IT processes, they also need to be evolved within those financial institutions to actually deal with this technology.
I was going to ask you as a follow-up, what current banking practices need to evolve to be able to, but you already answered it. So
Like all of them.
So Jennifer, we'll go down the line from you, but what's the biggest
She's from
technological
Gito Labs, I
obstacle
believe.
in having traditional financial services or banking firms plug into DeFi itself today? So applications like
DeFi,
Uniswap, which
DeFi.
allows for
Huh.
permissionless swapping
I
of
told you banks
assets,
were going to do
or
DeFi.
Aave, which allows
Been saying it for
for
years.
lending type activity. And then if you can each say what you're doing from your particular vantage point to try to move past these technological obstacles, that would be great.
Sure. I think the reality is you have to have expertise in both traditional systems as well as digital asset systems to understand how to integrate them and how they can best work together. So I'll start with some of the work that we're doing on the traditional systems. We were one of the leaders with real-time payments. We were actually the first bank to send a payment. When the credit limit increased, we were the first bank to send a payment there. We were one of the first banks on FedNow. The power of immediate payments is so important in this economy. And, we continue to work with our clients and, the 9,000-ish banks, Jackie, you mentioned adoption, we still have more work to do, right? And so getting those consumers and those communities access to immediate payments is a really first important step. Second is being able to move dollars 24/7. That is a big use case, particularly from our bank and our corporate clients who want to be inside the walls of BNY, able to settle dollars 24/7. So that's a really, and by the way, not a lot of banks can do that, which is why the digital asset structure really can potentially leapfrog some of the bank legacy infrastructure. But we've done both to make sure that we're ready. And the third is, AI. And we are heavy users of AI, particularly in the payment space, whether it's payment efficiencies and the operations, whether anomaly detection, fraud control. AI is going to really help us get more efficient and, provide safer and faster payments. But then also across the industry broadly, ISO 20022 is really important because as we've talked about today, it's about setting standards. And that's why ISO is so important. And we've leaned in so heavily. We've tested with clients. We've worked with Swift. We do a lot of speaking on it. So it's really important to continue to control and really go out into the market and think about standards. And then, there's lots of folks in the industry thinking about it. I know CHIPS and Fed are also exploring, expanded settlement windows. So all of these things work together to make the traditional infrastructure more efficient. Okay, so, but there's still gaps, right? There's 90 plus immediate payment systems around the world. There's hundreds and hundreds of clearing systems around the world. We see that illustrated sometimes in cross-border payments with the different formatting. So there are still some efficiency that the digital asset ecosystem can really help us solve. And, if you think about, you mentioned digital asset custody, we launched that several years ago. We are heavily researching and working on both. And so we launched digital asset custody, and we have already integrated the traditional and the digital asset rails together in one application. So expand that to then stablecoin and some of the on and off ramps that you have between fiat and digital asset. We do that today for many clients and many of you in the room. And we work very, very closely with many digital asset providers, just even providing traditional banking services. So I think that's a really important part of learning that as well. But the interesting thing about BNY is, we touch about 20% of the world's investable assets. We clear $2.5 trillion of payments every day. So we have an obligation and an opportunity to really work
$2.5
together
trillion a
across the
day.
industry to continue to really set these standards. And whether that's through, Agora or Swift or Guardian and all the other projects that are going on, we're doing both of these things in parallel because ultimately they have to be able to work together.
I love how people say this is a nothing burger too. It's
Michael,
just,
I mean, how are
I just
you
don't
bridging
understand. It's okay.
the biggest technological gap between bringing DeFi and TradFi together?
Yeah, so Becca, I think that we've started at 2021 when we did Aave Arc together, when you were at Aave, and I think that at the end of the day, the journey that we started back then. So
That's
Aave
what I want
Arc
to
was
get the list of these speakers.
I would say the first project around DeFi back in 2021 that was really catered into the institutional client. And what we identified at that point in time is that for any intermediary that basically has some license obligations, whether money transmission, trust, banking, the compliance element and then the permissionless nature of DeFi were not really resolved, right? And we created basically a permission a permission level on top of permissionless DeFi
Here we go.
that solve that. Now, kind of fast forward to today, we have a bunch of projects in flight that are integrating DeFi and also providing the compliance level for layer for DeFi, targeting the institutional market. I would say that the main appetite right now over there is coming from the large fintechs, like the names that were mentioned here before, that they are, whether it's like the Stripes, the Revoluts of the world, etc., that they're already digital ready. I mean, they already have wallets, they already have like sizable amount of users in the tens of millions of users that own crypto assets and specifically stable coins, and they want to figure out how do they now leveraging Aave, Morpho, Uniswap, all those
You brought up
things
Morpho.
to basically give their
Hey.
clients better, more robust access to those markets.
We're so early.
The way that we do it is basically twofold. The first one is really creating adapters and infrastructure for them that allows them to interact with those markets through a secure API. So something that we didn't talk about over here.
Talking about
is
the future
actually
of finance,
security
Aaron.
element of accessing DeFi. Some of the questions over there is like, how do you know that you are accessing the right DeFi smart contract? How do you know that you're sending the right transaction? How do you have the right permission level and all the approvals that are needed to send a transaction? So we basically solve all that for them. We call it a native DeFi solution, so it gives them all the security that we were able to figure out for them for their CeFi interactions. And the second element is, which is actually still in the works, and I think that this is where a lot of collaboration is happening right now with the regulators, is really solidifying the approach around the compliance and kind of how do we KYC and how do we making sure that there is no illicit financial activity within those protocols, which is basically, if I'm now doing a swap on Uniswap, how do I know that the other guy, that the counterparty on the other side is not from North Korea, right, or some kind of OFAC sanctioned entity that if I own MTLs, e-money license, trust, you know, that will be a huge issue. So, so for that, there are a few approaches. There are some of the traditional approaches that we've taken, like whitelisting, and now we actually have a team that is working on kind of the next iteration of that is using on-chain identity. And we think that on-chain identity, that is just like, you know, a much broader component within the regulatory landscape that is now being looked at across pretty much like every regulator globally, bounded into that utility is going to actually unlock this for both retail, institutional, and probably will solve that in the most elegant and technologically native way.
Yeah. One quick anecdote before I turn it over to you, just about Aave Arc, which is from a compliance perspective, back 5 years ago now,
She's from
we used
Jitto,
one
I'm
of the
pretty
blockchain
sure.
analytics
Yeah.
companies to do an analysis of the
And
smart
used to be at
contract
Aave.
pool of all the assets that were in the pool and to see what the
That's
connection
Rebecca Reddick.
was to any wallets that were associated with illicit finance. It was very, very low, and so we were able to sort of put that out there. And I just went back to the same blockchain analytics company maybe a month ago to ask about it, and the guy that I know there very well said, you know, you were the only people to ask for something like this 5 years ago, and now all we get is banks asking for the same type of analyses. So, you know, everything old is new again, and, you know, Aave Arc was a bit before its time. But Jackie, tell us about
No, it's great.
technological. Yeah.
I don't think that there is
God.
technology as holding people back today. I think it's knowledge and ability to execute around building. And so on the knowledge side, I'd say core teams of financial services are not geared to have the insight and judgment to understand what's being built on a blockchain and how the products work. And so it's hard to both regulate or oversee something as a financial institution when you truly don't understand it. And so the knowledge gap, I'd say, is pretty extreme. And you know, we've been doing crypto for years, and I think one of the things our regulators felt comfortable with is that we understood the products that were on our rails. And so
Whatever, Tina Fey.
when people were claiming they were being debanked, you could come to Lead Bank and we were able to work with you because we actually understood the products and had the confidence of the FDIC and the Fed. I'd say the second issue around ability to execute, I mean, Michael made the reference about the velocity of the way things are being built and executed on chain. You have to be able to build and execute with engineers that can work in real time and have very quick sprint cycles in order to be able to operate in this dynamic environment. And I'd say a lot of financial institutions don't have that. And scale doesn't matter. Sometimes you can do more with 5 engineers than you can 10,000. And so it's more an issue of how do companies run in financial services where you have 50% of the market cap plus being 50 years older and more. And so a lot of these companies are going to have to reorient around velocity. And so the only real technical issue I've seen in the last few years is that around 24/7, 365, which Jennifer referenced. But having said that, you could adjust around that so that you could manage it and be able to execute within an institution so that you actually could send and release within an institution 24/7, 365. And so that's existed. It's just something that an institution had to build against until you were actually able to use Fed windows that are 24/7, 365, which you can today. And I also think now most companies are quite comfortable with the windows that exist. It's not optimal. So I'd say like that would be the one tweak I would make to make sure that the liquidity is able to be managed and all the counterparties are able to be managed across a dynamic perspective of what 24/7 looks like. You don't have consistency in all the counterparties that exist today. And I'd say companies like IntraFi as an example, or the institutions that federate bank deposits, or even on the flip side, core providers, which aren't 24/7 oriented in their mindset of how they do things. And so, my summary would be there isn't a technological problem today. It's a capability, not a technology.
I love that. Sergey.
Yeah, sure. So I heavily echo what Michael described. We are in similar situations with a lot of users. And I think there is a big hurdle to clear there in the traditional institutional world of integrating their existing systems with the chains. I think there's really 3 problems to solve. There's that first problem of the correct integration of the existing systems for books and records purposes, compliance purposes, key management purposes, all these different purposes with the chain, so that the large existing tech investment that was made by there's all these jokes about how banks still run on COBOL. Yeah, that's true. They're still going to run on all this stuff. So you have to make all of that compatible, and you have to make it compatible in an open standard. So
He's
you have
like,
to make
yeah,
it compatible
they're
in a way
behind.
where, to Jackie's point, you can get 5 engineers to do it successfully themselves. Then the next problem really is, how does the transaction actually work? So, okay, I've synchronized my internal books and records requirements, systems, accounting system, whatever system, and now I have to do a transaction. How's that transaction going to work? How does that operate? What information does it carry along? What does it prove to regulators, and so on? And then the final point where we started mentioning Aave, the new version of ARC is Aave Horizon, which Chainlink is actually the main technology provider for, powering it for cross-chain compliance and a whole bunch of other things. That's where you have a model similar to what you have in banking, where the destination is responsible for making sure that things are a certain way, for making sure that they're not dealing with certain parties, that the liquidity pools work in a certain way. So then the third problem is, how do you get this DeFi community that historically has been completely disconnected from any regulatory anything to meet regulatory standards? And the answer to that is smart contracts, right? So you write smart contracts which automate compliance. You write smart contracts that automate the proving of things to the counterparty, as well as to the regulator, as well as to the DeFi team. And so that third problem requires a set of on-chain smart contract standards for compliance, for cross-chain connectivity, and for data into that cross-chain and compliance set of contracts. And then all of that will have to work together, where you'll have to have the existing systems properly synchronized with chains to meet their requirements, You'll have to have the transaction that goes across chains to be properly formed and convey the right information to the receiving chain and to store the right information in all kinds of places that regulators and counterparties need to look to be sure that their transaction is correct and reliable. And then you need the destination of the transaction, in this case, the DeFi protocols, to have what's called regulated DeFi variant. So the reason you have like Aave and Aave Horizon is because you're not going to make Aave work this way. You need to make a separate version. And so all the DeFi folks need to make these separate parallel versions that are able to interact with all this regulated capital. That's called regulated DeFi. Seems to be that's what we're discussing here, which is kind of amazing. You know, a year ago, I wouldn't have imagined. If you told me a year ago you're going to be at the Fed discussing regulated DeFi, I'd be right, Michael?
And I love the
It's a
cowlick.
crazy idea, isn't it?
No, I remember what we discussed 2 years ago, a year ago, yeah.
A year ago, right? 2 years ago, maybe, who knows? But sorry, it's just it's a good thing. It's my way of saying it's a good thing. Thank you. So you have to get all three of those things to work. You have to get all three of them to happen. And then it'll all be lots of fun and a blast. And DeFi gets you 8% to 15% on the US dollar. So I can almost guarantee you that when you open the floodgates for people to get that type of yield on the US dollar in a compliant, regulated way,
That's what I keep
I
saying.
mean, the yield will go down, but it'll
Exactly.
still be high.
So
There's a high yield
Still be very
for the
high.
next decade.
it's
gonna go
I'm
down.
a moderator, not a panelist, because I'm not sure I believe that there should be parallel DeFi systems, but we can talk about that off stage. Because I also think, to your point, it will take away a lot of the benefits of DeFi, including
Bitcoin
the
and DeFi,
yield
guys.
and things
That's
like
what I've
that.
been
I think
saying.
there are other both technological and compliance solutions we can be thinking about and putting into place. But before we move on to the concept of stablecoins and tokenized deposits, which are actually critically important in DeFi, you know, in all good symbiotic relationships, people give a little bit. It's rarely 50-50. And so the question I have for everybody, and this is just like a quick, which is, you know, does DeFi need to come 90 and TradFi comes 10? What's the give and take that we expect to see? Jackie, do you want to?
I'll start. You know, we've worked with a lot of digital asset companies for a few years, and I'd say the one thing that has evolved but still needs more sophistication around it is that willingness to actually follow U.S. banking law. And so, you know, like a lot of companies that were debanked, you know, there's different qualities of what they were willing to do. You know, some of them were just young and they worked with a bank that had no financial experience. And so they decided to pull back from the digital asset space. Like that's
the way,
legit if you don't have the team that's able to do it.
This bank is the one
But
who
there are a lot of companies that are young,
highly
and
profited
developing
from Silicon
that,
Valley Bank going under and Silvergate.
if you actually had to go through
Just
the
for the record.
filings that are legally required as a U.S. bank, they are somewhere on one end of the spectrum, which is grossly negligent, or on the other end of the spectrum, just unsophisticated and evolving. And that's not everybody. It's just a group of companies that are just young, you know, developing, trying to grow as fast as possible. And they're just less willing to do what needs to be done in order to operate within the system. And so I have seen an evolution in the last few years where there was this incredible libertarian perspective around how people were going to operate in the DeFi world. And that has evolved, thankfully, where people have understood, and it was probably with the failures around Signature and Silvergate, that
Called it.
crypto companies actually said like, oh my
Failures.
God, we're like reliant on the banking system. Like
They're
our money
so evil,
markets
bro.
are reliant,
evil.
our liquidity flows are reliant. So we have to step up our game. And I do think they made incredible strides. And there are some amazing companies in the space that are rock stars in compliance and everything they're supposed to do. But when you have an
Wow. Can't believe
ecosystem
she
of
said that.
startups
Good little
that
boy.
is highly geared to growth, you know, they hopefully will like hire consultants and go get people who can help them build the bridges in order to onboard appropriately into the financial system. And I think that's probably the thing that requires the most work. And people are largely receptive, not everyone is, but people are largely receptive to it.
Yeah, and as a transition, that was a good transition into this concept of stablecoins.
You know those
and
people that like
tokenized
freedom?
deposits, and I know there's a
Yeah, we got rid of them.
separate stablecoin
Yeah.
panel, but
Thank God.
stablecoins are so critically
Horrible
important
people.
in DeFi because most traditional digital assets are very volatile. They don't always have a stable price. There can be large movements, as we've seen even over the last couple of weeks. And stablecoins usually are used as collateral for a lot of borrowing transactions on things like Aave and the like. And so you can't ignore how important stablecoins are and what Jackie was talking about. Even with Signature and Silvergate, you were talking about centralized digital asset companies. But even when you have something like a depeg of a stablecoin, it can have pretty significant ramifications cascading through these permissionless systems as well. But Jennifer, to start, and I think this is really important because there are a lot of misconceptions on it, what are the benefits of tokenized deposits versus stablecoins? So that's the first part of the question. I'd say, what are the main differences? And then how do you see tokenized deposits being used for payments in a permissionless system, if
Sure.
possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So
Permissionless, like
tokenized
that.
deposit, we think of that as cash in the bank, right? So it is a digital representation of a bank deposit. And so that stays at the bank. And so that stays within the walls of BNY as an example. And so the benefits of that are certainly cost efficiency, speed, but also liquidity optimization. Still one of the biggest problem statements that exists today in the payments industry is around optimizing your liquidity and reducing trapped cash and really reducing settlement risk. And so the tokenized deposits really help you do those things inside the wall of a bank. But then you have a stable coin. So stable coin is, think of that as cash outside the bank. It is backed by some form of collateral, cash, T-bills, what have you, but that can traverse across multiple chains and multiple systems. So we would see that existing alongside other forms of fiat and other forms of existing currency today. So there's a number of use cases. I think both are equally important, but they do different things.
That makes sense.
I want to
So,
keep you in
Sergey,
their walls.
obviously, what Chainlink does in terms of pulling data and feeding it into, I'd say, the majority of the DeFi ecosystem makes sense from a stablecoin perspective. But how do you think about doing data feeds for tokenized deposits, especially when the deposits are sitting at different banks?
So Chainlink tries to aggregate data from multiple sources whenever possible. It's one of the reasons the system now secures approximately 100 billion in US dollars. And some of the bigger users have tens of billions of dollars. It's because the data is aggregated from multiple sources in various fault-tolerant ways. With tokenized deposits and these types of things and proof of reserves, you often only have one source of the data. So you can't aggregate across multiple sources. You can create some additional checks. You can do something called securement, where once data proves that the reserves are there, you can decide if something should be minted or not. And this stops cases of over-minting completely. That becomes impossible because the contract itself is responsible for checking whether or not the reserves exist. It's not a people-driven process anymore. It's a smart contract driven check. But the data is often only as good as the sources that you can get. And in the case of tokenized deposits, stable coins, in the cases of more and more real-world assets, the data is often coming from a single source. And so people need to understand the risks that they're taking. There are risk frameworks like the Digital Asset Security Control Principles. Let's say that 5 times faster. DAS-CP. So that's an interesting risk framework where you're considering all the different aspects of risk, the on-chain contract risk, the Oracle risk, the data source risk. But generally speaking, I think what's going to be the most useful is that when there's a stable coin or a tokenized deposit or a real-world asset, there's a way to create transparency for the market, right? So the market knows this tokenized deposit is guaranteed by this bank or this custodian in this class of account, with this data source being the only data source, right? And we already provide that information about our proof of reserves for stablecoins, and then the market can make their own risk decisions, right? So the best version of this is actually when you can provide what we call proof of liabilities, proof of solvency, other proofs of the status of the underlying banking partner or banking system. And I think personally that the more information that you provide about an underlying tokenized deposit, stablecoin, real world asset, and once you provide that to a market that's sufficiently developed where people are assessing risk because there's enough value in there to care about risk, well, then the stable coins and the tokenized deposits and the real world asset that prove things at a higher level and are actually built in a more de-risked way will be more attractive, right? So that's just that's the blanket assumption we have. And so our goal is to build systems that, just like blockchains create transparencies within the block, we want to create transparency of all the corresponding systems that put the information into the block, such as the data source in this example.
Makes sense. A few different questions, and I want to make sure there are really good audience questions that are coming
Morpho
in
is
through the slide,
ripping,
so I'm definitely
too.
gonna
Nice.
Is it?
save time for
Yeah, waking
those.
up pretty good.
But Jackie, two different pieces. One, can we ever use tokenized deposits as collateral in DeFi? And two, can you ever see banks plugging into DeFi for liquidity provision services?
I think there's always an always. I think tokenized deposits, just in the way that, ACH is a messaging protocol that was started 50 plus years ago, tokenized deposits will be, messaging protocol for storing banks. It's as simple as that. Like, money is largely digital today. Like, the definition even of what fintech is largely blurred today because, it's a digital manifestation of money and the movement, storage of money. And so as it relates to tokenized deposits, it's really just advancing digital technology around what a deposit is and adding modern technology around messaging, identity, and programmability around the idea of a deposit. And so I think it's a technology that's going to be used. I think we started to see it, BlackRock, when they launched their ETF, was probably not tokenized deposits, but you could see the train coming down the line when you started to see asset classes get tokenized. And so it's just a matter of turning any kind of asset class into a digital messaging protocol. And so I think banks are going to use it broadly as a technology. How long that takes, say, is a massive question, just because they don't have engineers, and they'll probably start with outsourced technology of other infrastructure providers.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Michael, you probably have something to say about how to bring this all together too.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have some maybe slightly controversial observation on all this. We've been engaged with both stablecoins and tokenized deposits for the last couple of years. Currently 10% of all USDC and USDT is actually going through Fireblocks, so we have pretty good statistics. But we also been engaged with quite a few banks on tokenized deposit projects since 2022, for example, with ANZ and the National Australian Bank in Australia. The main issue that I see with tokenized deposits on public blockchains, there are successful projects on private blockchains, like the JP Morgan coin, right? And back in the days, there was the signature that was also a tokenized deposit. On public blockchains, it's actually unclear what happens when when it goes from first party to third party, and what is the liability of a bank. It's actually not being established, and that killed, from what I've seen, every project or every bank project that was trying to do tokenized deposit on a public blockchain. Now, this is not a technological issue. It's a regulatory question that no one knows how to answer today. Right. And that actually, I think, basically puts
we have the tech to do this.
The true limitation of how
tokenized
deposits can
get the rules out of the
with
way?
the DeFi primitives that we have today.
I agree. The regulatory, as a lawyer, the regulatory
Where's
sirens were
Ludacris?
going off when I thought about how could we use
Move!
deposits in DeFi. Okay, so to make sure we have time for these few questions that we've gotten, which are great, I just want to finish off going down the panel as quickly and concisely as you can say it. What are your recommendations for the Fed to prepare for the payments landscape as it evolves to converge with DeFi?
Oh, this is so validating.
Yeah, so I would make the existing Fed infrastructure compatible with the stablecoin, tokenized deposit, and other payments infrastructure. I would make sure, I would ask the Fed to think about
Yes, you.
making the guidance very clear on what the risks are in relation to stablecoins, tokenized deposits, and these things, so that the payment landscape can grow, because the payment landscape represents essentially the buy side of the digital asset economy. And then the buy side makes the sell side, the issuance side, that makes the tokenized funds more attracted, right? So I would look to make your existing infrastructure compatible, and I would look to create clear guidance that manages risk appropriately to make sure that the stablecoin and tokenized deposit, the payment side of the digital asset economy, can grow successfully, and can grow successfully out of the United States more than anywhere else.
I would actually tread carefully and
That's
watch and iterate as we go over the next few years. There's two reasons. One, the intersection of AI, fraud, reversibility. We are at a moment in time with AI where we don't actually know what is going to happen from a fraud point of view. And I think the reversibility and the opportunity for fraud vectors is rather extreme. And so I think, you know, it's always going to be great until the moment when, on a wide scale spectrum, you know, like everybody's grandma was just defrauded because of deepfakes. And so I think this intersection of trying to be super innovative, enabling crypto and new payments technologies and AI is worthy of just being incredibly, incredibly cautious. And I know that's very like nanny moment for everyone in the room, since we're at an innovation conference. I just think the better strategy is slower and steady and watching it, as opposed to trying to explosively change everything and not having managed this intersection of AI, which I think is still largely untested, unknown, and asymmetric risk into the system.
Bitcoin putting up some moves too.
I tend to agree with both observations. The only thing that I would say is that there is still an economic question that comes quite a lot, especially in discussions with banks, right? That it's a question around how, well, the Federal Reserve eventually is responsible for the banking system in the United States. And at the end of the day, there is an economic question that comes pretty often with central banks around how stablecoins can, or can impact the credit in the overall system. And I think that this question also needs to be kind of further researched, and that there will be a clear guidance and opinion on how this all going to play out, because clearly it may or may not have big business model implications for banks.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said. I think four things. First is just continuing to upgrade the existing infrastructure 24/7, et cetera. The second is standards and setting standards across formatting, just continuing that work, I think is really important as you look to integrate. I think third, Jackie, you said it is on fraud. Faster payments result, banks have to, and everybody else in the market has to adjust more quickly, right, to assess fraud and to make fraud decisions. So I think continuing to really lean into the fraud topic is very, very important. And then I think finally, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, is look, faster payments and stable coins and tokenized deposits, like you can access liquidity faster, but then you have to have the associated kind of standards around stablecoin redemption, as well as liquidity policy to support that.
Amazing. Okay, there's actually one question for everybody.
Amazing.
And we have a little over 5 minutes left. So concise answers, but everybody gets a last question. So this question is from Congressman Foster for Sergey. Your internal Oracle syncing network does not use permissionless blockchain. Does this make you a trusted third party and single point of failure?
Great question.
Yeah, so our system uses multiple independent nodes, just like blockchains do, and it does work with public chains as well as private chains. Generally speaking, those nodes can be configured into groups for a specific network that meets the requirements of a private user or a public user. So for example, if the Fed needed an Oracle network to do something specific, the Fed could choose the nodes and the conditions under which the nodes operate for the Fed-specific Oracle network. And that would be the risk that they choose in configuring that Oracle network. The public Oracle networks are configured similarly to how public chains are configured, with many node operators. Many of the node operators of Chainlink Oracle networks are also the node operators of any public chain nodes. So the Oracle network, there's over 1,000 Oracle networks running in the Chainlink
What an
standard.
The
So
Fed could
you
choose an
can
inferior product if
configure
they
an
want.
Oracle network to meet your requirements for compliance, location of the nodes, and these different requirements.
Okay. Jennifer, this question is for you. How would a revocable mechanism realistically work without undermining the decentralized, trustless nature of blockchain networks?
Yeah,
This is an
it's-
easy one just to...
Right, just no
Layup.
problem. I mean, that's exactly the question. I mean, technically, right, Fed chips are final, but you can in fact like revoke them if there's an issue. You can call the bank, et cetera. And so there is a process that exists to protect consumers and to protect banks and corporations around that. And we're just going to have
Protect
to
banks,
continue to
keyword.
partner in the industry to think about how we answer this exact question in the digital asset
It's
infrastructure.
never protect users,
Makes
but they
sense.
pass
Although
laws
I
under
find
protecting
reversing
users.
bank transactions is not as easy as just calling your bank. Okay.
Got her.
Jackie, this is for you. In TradFi, settlement finality depends on trust in institutions, and in DeFi, it depends on trust in code. As they converge, who should provide the trust anchors?
Oh, I love that.
I love this
I
question.
feel
Love
like
it.
we should have Camus
Oh.
in the room to answer some of these questions. So, I mean, trust is trust. And I think every institution is responsible for their own code, regardless of whether they're theoretically supposed to be a traditional financial institution or a modern digital asset company. I don't think there's any difference. And I think over time, this distinction will go away. I made the comment earlier, like, what is an ACH? What is any kind of money movement? It's digital money movement that's sent through messaging systems. And so this distinction is largely going to disappear as digital asset regulation gets instilled into the US economy and US financial institutions, because it will have a different but somewhat comparable set of regulations, and it'll operate with KYC, it'll operate with a lot of the same trust dynamics that are established. Now, hopefully, the biggest change will be using modern systems, like modern identification systems and modern technologies that we have today. I think that's still a problem, just because so many institutions, like it took 10 years to be able to use DocuSign at so many institutions. And like when you get those red emails from banks that say this email's from external, like stuff like that, as an emblematic kind of funny example, will have to evolve so that identity can be deployed in a modern way. I mean, it exists today, and we have CEOs in this room who are experts at identity. And so it's up to institutions today to be able to adopt those rules. And I also find that anyone who says, oh, I can't do that because it's not compliant, it's a crock. It's like a total crock. When you actually go push on financial institutions' compliance teams, you're like, show me that law. Show it to me. It's not true. And somehow nobody edited out the garbage to deal with modern systems of today. And so I think when people edit and put in modern identity, you're going to be able to have modern versions of trust.
Great. Whenever people use compliant, when we're talking about DeFi, I'm always like, compliant with what? Like, just tell me with what. Okay, Michael, last question. What are practical strategies that you've seen that will close the gap between legacy payment systems, tech, and processes with digital assets?
In 1 minute.
Yeah, in 1 minute. Very simple. Also a simple question to close it out.
Okay. It's definitely like, a 5-hour seminar. But look, at the end of the day, I think that the truth is that there is just a lot of education that needs to go to the teams that are currently working on that in the traditional financial space. And I think that there are a bunch of enterprise-grade partners, providers, vendors, however you want to call us, whether it's like us, Chainlink, Chain Analysis, a lot of folks that have built this muscle over the years, worked with institutions and invested just like hours over hours over hours to basically bring the operations team, the compliance team, the technology teams, all those folks and educate them on that. And it's also extremely important to bring the executive team on board in those organizations to understand it. I would actually argue that in most cases, the final blocker is basically kind of getting the CFO, the chief risk officer, those guys over the line. And by the way, the most important thing is actually to give them. That's what I actually tell now all the people, like download the wallet, download the MetaMask on your phone, and then I send them USDC, and then I tell them to send me back the USDC. And that's, I think, like, where the light bulbs go.
It's a reversible transaction. Just
It
kidding.
is, it is a reversible transaction, yeah.
Well, thank you very much again to the Fed and Governor Waller and everyone here who put this together. Thank you to these amazing panelists who are clearly experts in everything they're working on and creating the bridges that we need to bring TradFi and DeFi together.
So a big thank you.
What a bunch of dorks.
So a big
I
thank
know
you
those
again
guys
to
in the
our
audience. No, I have
panelists.
no idea what was just said.
So I have to share that if I had created a bingo card for today, I
who's
would
this
not
lady?
have put COBOL on it. So thanks to Sergey for bringing that up. So we're going to start with a 30-minute break before our next panel.
That is so insane.
Yeah, it's that really blew my mind. There's a lot to unpack there. If you guys haven't been in crypto for a while, like I saw somebody in the chat asking, is this a nothing burger? And it's like, no, that's about as fat of a burger as you could have. They're taking a break. They're gonna come back. We might come back a little bit later. They're gonna have Circle and Paxos, two stablecoin issuers, talking a little bit later today. Yeah, there's the full schedule there. So we'll probably we'll do our normal show now, cover the news, kind of update you guys on price and everything that's happening in crypto. But that was about as important of a thing you could possibly watch.
I longed Ave while they were talking, dude.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like,
How's that?
Is
that going
it's really
good?
good. I'm up 101%.
Love it.
So,
Yeah, I mean, we got
um,
just real quick. I mean, let's go ahead and hit some of the price stuff just while we're at it. I mean, obviously, while that was going on, Bitcoin price was moving. Let's just see what moved in the hour. I mean, Plasma, Ether, 5, Morpho, like you said, caught a bit. I was shocked that they actually mentioned Morpho. Morpho, way smaller of a project than most of the other things. Can we summarize? Yes, we're going to summarize. I'm going to kind of give my take on what I think was happening there, kind of my translation. Yeah, explain it like we're 5. I will do my best. So I'm super pumped because this is what I've been saying on this channel for years now, that, Bitcoin is Bitcoin. It will be a digital store of value. It will be a reserve backing asset. But I also see a massive opportunity in DeFi because all banks will start to use DeFi. The opportunity that is there in DeFi right now, like DeFi and TradFi are coming together. And that was literally it. I know some of you guys didn't love everybody on that panel, but realistically what you had, the moderator was from Jitto Labs. That's DeFi. Chainlink enables DeFi. Fireblocks, wallet infrastructure for institutions, like you need it if you want to do DeFi at a large scale. If you want to have DeFi investment funds and hedge funds, you need to be able to provide clear custody. And Fireblocks, they actually, what they do is they have multiple solutions. You want a self-custody solution, an on-chain self-custody solution, like Fireblocks makes that possible. So you guys can't hate on the infrastructure of taking this industry to the next level. Chainlink's doing it. Fireblocks is a big part of it. Now, they also had 2 bank people on there, and I think those were the ones you guys mostly didn't like. The Leeds bank lady, like I said, more or less, I'm not going to say she specifically took it out, but I will say the company that she's the head of, massively profited from the fall of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature, 2 banks that were largely involved with banking this industry up until this point. Andreessen Horowitz, I think, is behind Leeds Bank. So again, a lot of politics involved in all of that stuff. And then you had BNY Mellon. And if you guys don't know BNY Mellon, it's the oldest bank in the US. They've been very involved in crypto from the very beginning. Again, involved with Circle, involved with Goldman Sachs, so that's a lot of the stuff. when I hear BNY Mellon, I think Goldman Sachs, Circle, all of that stuff is kind of one big tangled web. So it's old money is basically what you need to hear. Is the old money is coming into crypto. The banks that own the banks, the people, those that are operating the strings. And what we just witnessed was the "if you can't beat them, join them" conference,
Right.
and that's exactly what we're seeing right now. Banks, I saw somebody in the chat saying they're not going to pass that yield on to us. You're right, they're not. But what you're going to see, there's actually competition in banking for the first time in decades. And what you're going to see is there's going to be a tech product that can say like, yeah, hey, we'll pay you 5% on your savings account. We'll pay you, again, your Bank of America is getting you 0.005%. We'll give you 5% or 3% or 8% or 2%. I don't know what they're going to pass on to the users, but they're going to be able to do that because they're going to be making 50%, 60%, 80%, 100% in DeFi. And that's going to continue for the next decade. Now, that 100%, like the guy he was very honest. He said, there's a lot of money to make. It's going to get smaller, but there's a lot of yield to be made in DeFi. So if you can make 100% on your dollars in DeFi right now, which those of us who do DeFi all the time, no, it's really not that hard to outperform the dollar. 50, 60% on dollars, pretty easy, especially with banks that have large scale of billions and billions of dollars. Even if I can do it with the money that I'm doing, these big banks can do it.
Right.
So if they're making 100%, they might give you 5%, and then that 100% might become 80%, might become 75, 70, 60, and it will trend down and get commoditized and get much more efficient over this next decade. But we've probably got 10 to 15 years of opportunity in DeFi, whereas us as the users,
That's what I was
there's
taking from it, is we
yeah,
have time,
we have
right?
plenty of time. Plenty of time.
Right. It's like what they just said is like it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yes. And they're trying to figure out how to do it. Yeah.
Right. And it can be maddening, right? When you see these things coming, say 5 years ago, you fast forward to now, we're seeing essentially Federal Reserve governors talking about chain link. They're even talking about Morpho, which is absolutely insane. Of
Hmm.
course, Trump had to put a crash out tweet. Or he put a crash out tweet about Hamas or something like that, like right before we went live.
Oh,
Market
that's
flushed back
surprised. Yeah.
down. It's the crazy times that we live in right now. But if it wasn't crazy, then there wouldn't be any potential for massive upside, in my opinion. So it is very, very interesting. How's the rest of the market? Do you have the rest of the market pulled up here? We
Yeah, I'll
can
go ahead and
check
go
out
over
the
that. If you
prices.
want to, I did see a couple of people asking about CME gap. So if you want to look at that,
Yeah.
check it out. So altcoins still not performing, still getting crushed. We're not in our alt season yet. You want to see it up in here. Fear and greed still a buying opportunity, in my opinion, 33. But Bitcoin coming in at 110. It briefly, we'll just look at it while Drew's pulling up the deeper chart. Obviously, let's just look at the last day. So this is kind of in the morning. There's the crash out, or this is in the middle of the night. So we were heading back up. There's that crash out tweet. I think Trump did mention a conference with China on trade talks towards the end of this month. So that's why
Mhm.
we initially pumped. Then he crashed it again. So I have a feeling, this is what I was saying in the Discord earlier, we're going to range for a while until we see the government reopen and money start pumping in. I don't expect us to see back up towards all-time highs until maybe later in the month when we're getting
Mhm.
closer to the end of the government shutdown and again money pumping in. Morpho, though, I love seeing Morpho up. This is since it was right here. This is where they mentioned it at that conference when I was like,
Mhm.
I can't believe they just said Morpho, and it went bing straight up. So Morpho looking extremely strong. Overall market, we'll just look at the top movers. MXY Finance or MYX, Zcash, Dash, Bitcoin Cash, Plasma still hanging strong. Plasma, we're going to talk about a little bit later what happened with Coinbase and Echo. Plasma, one of the projects funded by Echo, launched off of Echo, and that was probably the hot news of last night. This morning was what Coinbase did with Kobe and Echo. So huge shout out to both parties there. That's a pretty substantial deal. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Do you have that CME gap? Can you see if that filled? I know it was around 107 and change. I don't know the exact number. I know a lot of
Yeah,
people
let
asking about
me
it.
I'm looking at essentially the CME right now and just kind of looking through it.
I know it
Going
was
through
close. Yeah.
so we went down to about 107.7.
Oh, nice. So we did. Yeah.
107.7.
Where's the gap?
Um, well, this is on the daily, and I'd take CME gaps off of the daily on the BTC one exclamation points, the CME futures.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit confused about what everyone was so worried about with
They're
that.
probably looking at it at the wrong time frame because really, guys,
Yeah.
if you zoom in too much, then it if you're talking
You
about
get all
4
kinds
hour,
of them. If
yeah,
you could change
it's
your
the
time
dailies
frames.
that matter. Yeah.
Right. The dailies matter on the CME side. From what I see, I mean, there does absolutely remain the $92,000 CME gap. Other than that, we've basically clipped every single other one. So if you want to use whatever time frame your heart desires and create those CME gaps in your mind for yourself, go right ahead. We are at a point where people are in absolute disbelief that this market's going to continue moving up. And I was on a show with James Wynn and Bitlord last night. There's dudes in there calling for, $56,000 Bitcoin, and then like, I love talking to James Wynn because he's so unhinged. He was talking about, a flush out maybe down to like $60,000 and then rising to $300,000 or $400,000 per Bitcoin within 2026, right? So he's got really hyperbolic targets. Um, I'm at the point right now where I fight back with the data that we have on what's different with the 4-year cycle and the slight adjustments to expect there within. But crypto's never been more here to stay. And
Like
hearing
100%, never been more bull. The macro environment, like just watching that right there, I could not be more bullish. Not for I guess the near long term, but like the next year to 2 years. I mean, you even hear him say it like, it might take a couple of years, and he's probably right. It'll take about 2 years, but you have every moment you have right now before this pump is a massive gift of accumulation. You need to be accumulating. RWAs are going to be a part of this as well. That's why you hear DeFi and RWAs talked about a lot. We just pulled up KTA pumped, Avantis pumped, like a lot of stuff is pumping on this news and information, and it really, really is a huge opportunity. So
you know what's not pumping off this information, TJ?
What's that?
Gold. Gold is pulling back viciously right now.
Oh
So
wow. Well, hey, that's what we were pulling it back yesterday. I mean, gold needs to cool off for crypto to really start moving up great. So, again, I am exceptionally bullish after watching that, and I think we have an incredible opportunity to accumulate again strong projects that generate revenue within DeFi, like Bitcoin first. You're going to want Bitcoin. That's what's going to set your family up for the future. That's what you're going to be able to retire on. That's what's going to store any value you've built up, any value or wealth you've created. You can store it in Bitcoin. If you want to make new wealth, there's huge opportunities in DeFi, massive opportunities in DeFi and RWAs. Right now, you've got a decade to capitalize on this. Get your money in, learn about the best thing you could do is learn how to use it. Don't just speculate. The people that I see that are successful in crypto and especially in DeFi, they don't just buy the hot project that they think somebody's talking about and they think it makes sense, so they buy it and sit on their hands. They say, okay, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to use the product. I'm going to see if I like Solana. I'm going to see if I like, I mean, again, having Jitto Labs, Chainlink, Fireblocks, BNY Mellon. I mean, these are crypto native people. These are people that have moved the industry forward at a dramatic pace. And they basically said straight out, like to tell you what you just saw, like your 5, all the banks are coming into crypto over the next year to 2 years. All the money in the world is going to be operating on crypto rails, and we are just getting started. You absolutely are not bullish enough. That's what we just witnessed. That's what we just saw. The Federal Reserve is hosting this, by the way. And doesn't matter that nobody in the audience had any clue what any of those people were talking about. Like they had no idea. Like only words that make sense to those people sitting in the audience were like compliance. They were like,
and
oh yeah,
risk.
compliance.
Right.
Yeah, we need to risk prevention. We need to have compliance. And that's another thing I wanted to touch on because that lady was talking so scared about AI and compliance. I know for a fact they're already solving this problem. So this company right here, SoCure, I actually was talking with somebody from this company over the weekend at a party, just a happenstance. You know, he was like, oh, this is what I do. And he's like, oh, no way. Like, and one of this company's clients is Coinbase. And if you guys are under, like what she's talking about is a real price. So you go Discover, Uber, Capital One, Robinhood. I wonder if Coinbase is even going to come up on here. But, you know, what she's talking about with AI and fraud and KYC is a real problem where you've got, hackers from North Korea applying for positions in a security role using fake LinkedIn and using fake video chats to kind of verify who they are. And so we do this company though is incredibly DraftKings, people trying to steal people's money that's digital. This is not a new thing. Banks need it all the time, insurance companies need it all the time. And this is a problem that's already actively being solved. So when you hear these bank and compliance people, all right.
Oh,
Excuse me. I can't stop it. Once it's coming, I know it's coming, but I can't stop it.
that was a big buildup. That was a big
Once
buildup.
you hear these banks and these compliance people talking about risk prevention and we got to have compliance and all this different stuff, they're usually just using that as a fear mongering tool to slow things down because they know their tech is dated. Which that was one of my favorite parts when Sergey was trying to talk about like integrating with banks and having to work with their IT and he couldn't help but laugh. He's like, yeah, their systems are extremely dated. Yeah, their IT is not really IT. So,
dude, Chris Barrett from Chainlink totally trolled the whole infrastructure right before this too. He reposted this Chainlink up and running 24/7 in response to this worldwide outage, and highlighting that. And there's a lot of side-handed notes and our crypto system CCIP still worked while the AWS outage worked, but the concept of crypto taking over the existing system, even if the system isn't broken right now, doesn't make sense to me. There has to be problems for crypto to fix, and there are those problems that we see right now. I was trying to log on to my bank account yesterday, and it was falling victim to that AWS outage. So, seeing the opportunity in these problems, I think, is where I feel the most excited. I feel excited that they haven't been solved yet, and we're really at just the very beginning of all of this. Something that Tina Fey lady was talking about was also interesting about how long it took for DocuSign to actually be adopted, because it's a completely logical process for signing paperwork and getting things moving quicker in terms of contracts. And those are big deals. We're talking about mortgages, massive real estate deals. Moving into the realm of digital payment communication after we've already passed over, signing legal documentation, all of those things, identity verification. This is all a giant 30-headed hydra of a technological renaissance that we're at the doorstep of. Yes, there's 25 million projects out there, and most of those are going to end up being useless. But if you really peel back the layers of the onion and find all the different connections and overlapping relationships with the important crypto projects that are out there getting their rails, and this is what I feel very validated, TJ, that we were talking for a long time about finding crypto projects that plug in and better the existing system rather than just trying to usurp the entire infrastructure. And all of a sudden we all wake up on Web 3.1.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with this guy said right here. Memes were a distraction extractor strategy for retail over the past 2 years, in my opinion. It's not betting on the market. And I agree. Like it's so hard in crypto because there are so many distractions. But like, if you can lock in and find these strong projects, and they are coming back at 1050, we might jump back in and see what they're talking about. But if you can find these strong projects and settle in for the long haul and just accumulate Chainlink, and again, Morpho, the fact that they keeps getting mentioned, Coinbase, you don't want to fade Coinbase. We're going to talk about some of the things Coinbase Ventures has been doing. They
TJ,
are what do you got?
We got a problem. Okay.
Oh, Jerome Powell in
You are banned.
No, I don't care. We can let Jerome Powell hang out. He needs to learn about crypto. That's what. And somebody said that while we were doing this early on. Like, people underestimate. We need education and patience with these people because they do hold the purse strings, right? So you can hate on banks all you want. You can hate on old money and regulators. They use regulation like a weapon. I don't love it. I don't love that they poo-pooed libertarian. Like, oh, these people that want freedom, like, they're finally backing off that whole freedom thing and letting us still maintain our control. And I liked Sergey's answer on that too, where he's like, yeah, the Fed, if they want to have like a product that they take risk on, they can use our system to do it. But if you want to have one that's way better with thousands of public nodes and a public infrastructure, like, that exists too. And so they're doing it the exact right way of like giving them options, letting them feel like they have control because they are slowly losing control. You could see so many of you guys in the chat could see the fear in that Leeds Bank, in the banking lady's voice, and like, slow down. We have to make sure we can still control. Like, we want to be able to reverse transactions if we want to. And I love that lady's like, yeah, I don't think it's as easy as just calling up your bank and they'll fix it for
Right.
you. And it's definitely not. So
Right.
let me hit a couple top news stories just in case they come
Sure.
back, because this is pretty important here and part of what has got us moving with a bullish sentiment. And again, I will say, I think the government shutdown does end here somewhat soon, maybe end of October, maybe early November, and that's when we'll resume the bull market. So I would say October isn't canceled; it was just delayed. I think we're going to see it in November, but crypto markets surged as Trump confirms the October 31st summit with Xi Jinping. So if they actually make some trade progress, obviously that would massively pump the markets. We've got a rate cut coming next week. But we're going to meet in a couple weeks. We're going to meet in South Korea with the President Xi and other people too. Trump told Fox News following the de-escalation of the trade stuff. Again, if you guys have been following this channel for a while, we've been breaking down, and we didn't create the playbook. It's Kobayashi letter. We've been showing it for quite some time, and this is textbook. Make a crazy statement, walk it back, send Basent out, make some progress on it. We had a strong rally on this news. I think it will continue. Market sentiment had hit a 6-month low, and that's what Drew was talking about. Is as soon as you start hearing people calling for 50K Bitcoin, 30K Bitcoin, these crazy low numbers, like that's max fear. You see the fear and greed index getting into the 30s. That's almost always a good time to buy. Almost always. Like, it's the simplest indicator, and we love in crypto to look at, draw lines on charts and do all these crazy things for indicators. But if you're on the long-term time frame and you just use the fear and greed, you can go back test it. If you just buy when the fear is high and sell when the greed is high, you're making a ton of money in crypto. And it's right here at the top of coin market cap. I mean, it's not that hard to follow. This indicator right here, fear and greed index. When you're down here in extreme fear, absolutely good times to buy. In the low fear, always a good time to buy. And you can see the price, it's just selling the greed, buying the, oh wait, you're not seeing what I'm showing. Sorry. This is what I was looking at. Fear and
Yeah.
greed index. When you're in the 30s here, it's probably a good time to buy. When you're down in the red, it's definitely a good time to buy. I mean, if you bought down here, this is when we were screaming at under 80K, 78, 76, 80, 82. I was selling houses and cars. I was doing everything I can. Like, where can I find money to buy Bitcoin at these levels? And then it just rockets up to 120. I mean, and then if you sell when we're up here in the extreme greed, I mean, you're doing pretty good. So this has been around for a long time. It's a very simple indicator. Try not to outsmart yourselves when it comes to that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm hyped up. Sorry if I'm talking fast.
I love it. I mean, this is exciting. And you know what? I was able to hop on a show for you for the very first time when we were in the depths of the bear market, man. And we were formed in that fire. This is the old
2022.
shirt.
Yeah,
This is
blockchain basement.
the old shirt, man. This is from all the way back then. Just a quick highlight as well. Gold is now sitting at just above $4,000. And boy, howdy, I hate myself for not taking that short yesterday. I was looking at this on there's this new decentralized exchange I'm yielding points on, and they allow me to trade gold, longing it and shorting it. This is a pretty substantial pullback on a 30 trillion some odd market cap, about 6.4%.
Wow.
So that's a couple trillion, a couple $1 trillion haircut to gold in the matter of maybe an hour or two.
And if it finds support there, I mean, you can almost, I'm not a master trader, but you can almost see, I don't know what the volume nodes are, but look at the middle, right in the middle of, up a little bit. Up,
right about
to the
here.
right. Yeah, up a little bit more. Right in that range is probably where you're going to see it find, consolidation and support. I don't know what it's, 4,200, 4,100, maybe 4,000 as a psychological. Maybe it ranges between 4 and 4,200. But I think gold has more upside in the future just because of the fiat problem that we have. But seeing it chill out a little bit is definitely usually, again, we covered it yesterday. When gold has a massive rally, as it starts to fall exactly like you just showed. I guess I can go pull that chart up again that we were looking at yesterday that shows gold rally and then gold pulls back and then Bitcoin absolutely
We
rips.
absolutely should, because people, are in absolute disgust with a tiny pullback in Bitcoin. I think the aggravation is completely uncalled for, because we didn't breach, a 30% pullback on our bull market. Like, we're
Right.
still absolutely within a bull
No,
market.
absolutely.
Um,
And so that fall right there, this arrow red down didn't exist yet. Now it's starting. We haven't gone all the way to 3,900, but we're about halfway through this red arrow right in here. And then this is the fun part down here for Bitcoin. We're going to see this part run up. And I absolutely think we're going to see that. It's absolutely going to play out. We've got this as news as well. Oh, not that one. This is tomorrow, by the way, guys. So all these same people that are at the Federal Reserve right now, they're going to go meet with the lawmakers tomorrow. So, like, if you
mhm.
don't think this is happening at an accelerated pace,
And that
uh,
meeting tomorrow is actually where the Ripple hopium can be derived from, right? Because
yeah,
Ripple is involved with this conversation tomorrow.
correct. Ripple, Chainlink, they're going to sit down with the Democrats. So we'll see what happens with that. But this also just happened. BlackRock's iBit goes live in London. First hour of volume hints at growing UK Bitcoin appetite. Everybody in the world wants to get their hands on some Bitcoin right now. And I do believe the price suppression or the consolidation that we're seeing is a result of people trying to hold the price down and before all this regulation comes through.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we know BlackRock's capabilities. We know that they don't launch bad products, and this will probably be largely successful.
No, I mean, it's through Coinbase. And really it's a consolidation. I feel that BRICS nations are preferring the path of Binance in the long term. There's a prediction from me. NATO nations are going to prefer Coinbase. And, seeing the opportunity for people in the UK to find at least some form of freedom, be it, this monetary access to Bitcoin, is bullish for me, but it's still going to be custodied by Bitcoin. I just emphasize, like, cold custody is king. I understand if you are dealing with, if you're not familiar with crypto, I just implore you to learn how easy a cold storage device is actually to use, because that's people talk to me and they're like, well, do you just leave it? I got it laying on a Coinbase account, but I couldn't get it on my Coinbase. I had a guy from my Milsim team notice that it's Druth Crypto on Discord, and he's like, holy cow, I haven't talked to you in years. He's been traveling in South Africa, blasting people. So he's like, I have crypto on a Coinbase account, but it went down yesterday. I wanted to look at it, and I was like, dude, how long have you held it? He's like, 6 years. I'm like, what are you doing leaving it on Coinbase for 6 years, man? Like, go put it to work somewhere or cold custody it. Like, kind of choose a direction here.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you guys know we're big fans of it. Arculus is one of our main partners here on this channel. Shout out to them. They help power this content. And if you guys don't know, I mean, this is their website here. It's just Arculus. You get a code DC20, gets you 20% off your purchase. They support all sorts of different coins. It's extremely easy to use. 3-factor authentication instead of 2. One of my favorite things is, I don't know if you guys know, we've had Adam Lowe, the product, I think he's head of product at Arculus. One of the things he does at crypto conferences, which you've got tech heavy people there, he hands his Arculus wallets to people and says, hey, if you can access my crypto, you can have it. Here you go.
Mm,
And they can't do it. So
right.
it's a very strong product. I love the way that they put their money where their mouth is. But speaking of Coinbase, we've been obviously talking a lot about Coinbase. That's
Yes.
part of why we have Aerodrome. We mentioned Morpho. Coinbase will be the institutional vehicle that seems to have the favor with the lawmakers here in the U.S. But if you guys aren't aware of the latest news, Up Only, one of the most prolific and well-known crypto shows of old times. Kobe, if you guys aren't familiar with who Kobe is, he's been in crypto since 2012. One of the top builders, somebody I have an immense amount of respect for. This was blowing up on Twitter last night. The rumors are true. We bought the Up Only NFT. So this NFT here was basically, they stopped making Kobe and Ledger stopped doing Up Only years ago, and everybody would tell them to bring it back. So he listed this NFT and he basically said for $25 million, anybody can buy 8 episodes. Doesn't convey any sponsorships. We're allowed to call you idiots for buying it or ignore you completely. We get to pick the guest. And if we like you, we might ask you for some suggestions. Everybody was like, what is going on? They just, Brian Armstrong comes out and says, yep, we bought this NFT. Up Only TV is coming back. $25 million for 8 episodes immediately makes the Kobe one of the highest grossing NFT creators, one of the highest paid streamers in the world. The media attention that I think this will generate is quite large. And you have to argue, I loved his reply here. Sir, you should fire whoever approved this. Don't spend it all at once. I mean, it was a pretty good exchange and everybody's talking about it. And then the other shoe drops, boom. Coinbase acquired Echo. If you guys don't know what Echo is,
Yeah, I want you to kind of explain, because like I saw this and I'm not accredited, I'm not fancy pants. I'll admit it. So can you kind of dumb it down for all of us plebes here?
Sure. Echo is essentially regulated ICOs. So Echo is a crowdfunding. That's just the simple way to do it. It's more complex than that, but it's a regulated, compliant, as those people at the Fed were just using, crowdfunding fundraising source for crypto projects. So, for example, Plasma, I mentioned it earlier in the show. XPL was funded on Echo, raised money on Echo, launched, and was a successful project. Another one we were talking about in the Discord is Mega ETH is another thing that was largely funded on Echo. And so basically, Kobe, if you guys don't know, co-founder of Lido Finance, extremely successful ETH staking protocol, also founder of Echo. I was on Echo probably within 2 or 3 weeks of it launching. I'd have to go back and look, but definitely very early. I think they did some beta. I wasn't in the beta testing where you had to have a specific link, but basically as soon as it was opened up outside of beta, I think within that first week or two, I was on Echo. And that's where you can seed invest, basically, startup venture invest in crypto projects. And this goes in tandem with Coinbase Ventures. I think it's called Liquify. They had just acquired Liquify not that long ago, which allows you to handle like token investing and all that sort of stuff. So Coinbase setting themselves up not only to be a custody partner, not only to be a trading, exchange, but really to be the place where institutional capital comes to invest in crypto. So now, if you have a Coinbase institutional account, you'll have access to participate in venture through crypto, like the ICO days of old, but now through a regulated, compliant vehicle that has KYC. They know where the money's coming from. It can't be used for fraud and money laundering, which again, you could clearly tell through that conference at the Fed that that's where those people are focused on, is what's compliant, what can we regulate, which again, you can have all your opinions. I definitely do on regulation. I believe in less regulation. I believe in more freedom in capital markets. That being said, that is a barrier we have to cross, if you want big money to come into these systems, regulation generally is going to be part of that. It's how old money moats a lot of their businesses and protects, is what I'm saying, builds a moat to where they can't lose that business like banks. They've had an incredible regulatory moat around them for a very long time. And finally, through tech, we've pierced that veil. So that's basically Coinbase bet $375 million on-chain ICO crowdfunding's next wave. So they essentially, you could argue this is a $400 million acquisition and they split $25 million off to buy that NFT. I think very smart, very based marketing. I do think it says Echo will remain standalone for now. I would imagine Kobe's still going to be a part of it. I mean, what I love about Kobe is his understanding of crypto, his ability to see a problem in the space, create a solution for it, and execute at a high level, stay close to the users. The way he was still doing a lot of the support on Echo early on, just like everybody gives Shane Copeland his flowers for Polymarket. Kobe's that same type of founder. So he just wrote a big thing the other day, how he's not a billionaire. I don't know. He might be getting a lot closer after this acquisition. I don't know if I necessarily believe that he's not a billionaire after this. I mean, he's done extremely well. Obviously, he was in the Ethereum ICO. He was a big part of Lido Finance. He, another huge exit for him. So just congratulations. I think it's a huge win for Kobe. I think it's a huge win for Coinbase. I love the direction that Coinbase is heading in. I'll say I'm glad we have a institutional Coinbase account. I do think they will get harder and harder to get as time goes on. But this is going to be what it takes. This is where crypto is going. If you want to have an edge in crypto, these are the types of products that need to be required for hedge funds and venture capital and all these different things to come in and really start funding this industry in a, again, regulatory and compliant way, which is what the big money wants to hear. They want to know, I'm not going to get in legal trouble. My government isn't going to come attack me for trying to invest in this space, which once you get to a high enough level of funds, that happens. The government, you have to be in line with the U.S. government. You do not want the U.S. government as an enemy. Whether
let's
whether
check
you,
it.
Oh, it's coming back.
Yep, let's go.
Locally regulated e-money licenses, or we partner with them. And then, of course, with our crypto entity, we execute the rest of the flow. We're also principal members of both MasterCard and Visa. So the way we try to run the company is having these pools of capital, sometimes in fiat, sometimes in blockchain, to be able to bridge the world, so that we as product people swallow the complexity, so we can give the customers the simplicity and the benefits without them having to go through the complexity.
And Fernando, follow up here. Based on that journey, I guess you've been iterating now for a while. What's been maybe one major change in product or go-to-market that you all have learned from hearing real feedback from customers?
Well, I guess the first one I kind of mentioned already. Like perhaps the intuition could have been just store of value, but turns out that transaction matters, right? So that's one of the counterintuitive ones that allowed us to actually dip into a transactional piece of the equation, which is interesting because the more use case you can serve, the more times you can bring your product to the customer, right? And then the second one, which kind of correlates to this one, is the fact that many of our customers are actually on the mass affluent side of the equation. So people who travel, people who work in technology, in finance, people who save, who invest their capital. So probably traditionally, most of the fintechs in Latin America had gone after the bottom side of the pyramid in terms of wealth, and perhaps we're penetrating from the top. So starting with the top 30% of the demographic pyramid, I would say.
Got it. All right, next let's move maybe over to Tim. Tim, as a bank here, you offer a service, which is the utility and the benefit of stablecoins. What are some of the problems that your customers, either consumer and their enterprise finance treasury teams, are trying to solve right now?
That's a great question. And I think
We
maybe
pumping.
I'll get there, but I want to make a couple of points here just based on some of the conversations we had on other panels, because I think it's instructive as we think about pathways for innovation, where to look. Like one of the rules that we use at Fifth Third is don't unsolve solved problems, okay? And I was listening to the discussions about interoperability and discounts and otherwise, and I couldn't help but think back to Thompson's banknote guide, which at least the folks from the Federal Reserve will remember existed in the U.S. during the free banking era prior to the presence of the Federal Reserve, where individual banks had to figure out how to discount notes that were issued by other people. And I think the end outcome there, the conclusion there, was that we were better off with a single currency that was valued at par. That would facilitate commerce. So our focus has been on looking at the solutions that are in the market and finding ways, whether it's through partnerships or just through introductions in places where we need to provide them, to utilize things that can become industry standards. So, our clients, when you look at the issues that they face, we're principally U.S. domestic. But we have a huge manufacturing base because the legacy footprint of the bank is Midwest and Southeast. So moving money across borders is a significant issue today. That's a problem that we solve by referring business to other banks. And as a matter of practice, another rule we try to follow is don't enable your competitors. So we have spent a great deal of time in the stablecoin ecosystem looking at ways in which we could utilize stablecoins to solve the interoperability issues and both the FX risk associated with the delay in clearance and the need to work through another financial institution to move money overseas. I think, and that, from my point of view, will be the first and most powerful use case for the Fifth Third brand. The more interesting things to me, though, have to do with the sort of infinite divisibility of stablecoins and the programmability and the things that we're going to be able to do through the business that we have as an infrastructure provider, a little bit like Jackie, to leading fintech companies and others to help them function in a world where agentic commerce is a material share of the economy, and where we can do more and more, whether it's for compliance purposes or to prevent fraud, or just to facilitate the linkage between contractual terms and payment settlement with the programmability of stablecoins.
Agentic. We are pumping so good right now.
Next up, Tim, another follow-up for you.
We're not
here.
the only ones watching this.
Given a lot of these outcomes, how do y'all think about buying versus building?
Yeah, my view is there are a handful of truly global banks that probably would benefit from having their own stable coin, like that facilitates book transfers. So if you're JP Morgan, if I were JP Morgan, I would be doing what JP Morgan's doing. But there are like 4,996 banks in the US that aren't JP Morgan or Citigroup or Bank of America or Wells Fargo. And for the rest of us, it's important that we move toward something that approximates more of an industry standard solution. That's the way that you solve for interoperability from my perspective, as opposed to layering more technology onto it. It's also how you solve for adoption, right? The tech here is obviously better than 150-year-old payments rails. Like, forget COBOL for a minute. Imagine what the FedWire was originally built on, given the comments that Governor Waller made at the beginning of the session. What doesn't exist today in most cases is the governance, right? And the governance layer is a thing that multiple parties need to be able to agree on here. And then we need to be able to drive user adoption. Like, Zelle was late to the party in peer-to-peer transfers, but it dominates today in terms of total volumes. And
regulatory
the reason it
moat
dominates is there's a single brand. It is and a governance mechanism that is embedded into something like I think they have 80% coverage in DDAs in the U.S. at this stage of the equation, and it therefore made it much easier for people who weren't in college and splitting pizzas to move on to a world where they were sending money P2P via an instant payment rail, and partnerships make that possible in a way that going back to a world where we were issuing our own currency probably wouldn't.
All right, next up, let's move to Chad. Chad, from the issuer operator seat, when should a bank build, partner, or just distribute?
How about now? There we go. I think it's difficult for any individual bank to issue, just like Tim was mentioning here. Even for the largest banks, I think it becomes difficult because the same reason Tim also mentioned, he doesn't want to fund his competitors. That's one of his number one rules. And I think you end up in a world where that would be the case if everyone started to use someone else's stablecoin. That's kind of the beauty of it, is that because it's not just contained on your own systems, but it's moving into other people's systems, you have to really create a value proposition to enable others to want to enable that. And so if you're the largest banks, you might be able to, but from everything I've seen, actually some of the largest firms—
I'm locked in right now. Holy God.
Maybe a la Zelle, and there's the Zelle Bank effort. There's a global bank effort that was announced, I guess almost 2 weeks ago now. And so that's what we have seen, is that, and I'd maybe mention a third point, which is there's a little bit of a skittishness because some of the large banks don't want to necessarily end up having their own token that could be facilitating cross-border illicit activity, and that there could be brand risk from that perspective as well. So that has all, I think, ended up pushing institutions to try to think about how can they use something that is brand agnostic, that has the interoperability, that allows them to be able to capture the economics. And I think there are a number of different ways you can do that without having to build it yourself. Obviously, building it yourself could create brand recognition. It can create better economics if you're able to create a way in which the market would create widespread adoption. And that's where there is this push and pull of the network effect that's inevitable. Largely, stablecoins today, and I don't certainly believe this will be the case in 2 or 3 years, are for the crypto ecosystem. And so can you get it in all the wallets? Can you get it on all the exchanges? Can you get it in the DeFi protocols? Can you enable it to have the right on-ramps and off-ramps through all the other parts of the payment system? Visa, MasterCard, the merchant acquirers. That's a lot of different gating points. And all of those gates have to say, yes, we would like to be able to accept this. And that means you're not going to end up with thousands of stablecoins that will be a rail. I think you'll end up with maybe 2 to 5 stablecoins that could be a rail. You can end up with thousands of stablecoins that look like a prepaid debit card or a co-branded card. I'm old enough to remember MBNA, who basically built almost 20% of the credit card market based off of having, Notre Dame credit card. I had one of those too when I graduated. And so you can imagine having lots of choice, almost infinite level of divisibility because of the technology and because the Genius Act and blockchain have set standards and set interoperability. So I can see there being so many different types of stablecoins, but not really so many stablecoins that ultimately you will use on a global basis. And that's what I think every institution has to think about, no matter how big you are. Where do you want to be? Are you large enough to maybe try to make a run at that? And most institutions aren't, so how could you instead find a way to work cooperatively?
Are there any link bears in the chat? Put bullish or bearish if you're bullish or bearish on that.
I was sitting in the audience earlier, gritting
bullish.
my teeth at the term TradFi every time it comes up, because Fifth Third is an old bank, that's true, but it's the least interesting thing about us. So I am, at the moment, I'm going to propose that we go with scaled fi versus DeFi. At least there was
Just
one
sex
other
life
bank
is
in
the
the
most
room
boring
because there
thing.
were some claps over here. And I know Jennifer feels the same way. But the point you're making, Charles, which I think is so critical, and the reason why we probably do need to arrive at a standard and have a couple of different networks, is in order to scale, you can't have an artisan model. Like, you have to have an industrial scale model. You have to have agreed upon governance principles. And you have to be able to support lots of different endpoints. And there's just no way to do that when you have so many different potential solutions in the market. So I totally agree.
Yeah, I'll just add my own little commentary. As someone who is a very active user of DeFi systems, I think most folks trying to get into the space don't appreciate the nuances of the complexity of the DeFi protocols and the on and off ramps and the wallets and making all those things work. It really is pretty difficult from a user experience perspective. All right, next up, we're going to Chad and Heath on this next one.
That's where the opportunity is for us, though, guys.
What are the top 2 bottlenecks at the perimeter? So things like KYC, AML, wallet UX, things of that nature. What are those 2 biggest bottlenecks? And then what's fixed and what do you think is going to change in the next couple of quarters?
Yeah, understatement.
You sure? I feel like we should give you a chance to talk.
All right. Well, my wife doesn't always say that. That's it. But so look, at a high level, when I think about frictions and sort of what are the things that are barriers to stablecoin use case, right? Or just using stablecoins, I'd say there are really 2 big buckets, 2 meta buckets. The first is the thing trusted, compliant, and transparent? In other words, do I need the Thompson's banknote guide or something like it to know whether or not I'm actually going to get my dollar back, right? I think the Genius Act largely solves that problem, particularly as it's implemented, because all stablecoins aren't equal and all stablecoins aren't stable. So I think making sure that we have payment stablecoins that actually are held to very high standards is job number 1. Good news is this country's made a very important decision on a broad bipartisan basis, and I feel like that problem is being solved. The second aspect, though, is assuming dollar's solid, the stable coin is solid, is it actually useful? Does it have utility? Does it have liquidity? One example I like to give is, suppose at the end of this conference, the Federal Reserve Board says, good news, we're going to give everybody money to buy your dinner at Reagan Airport. But we're not going to give you a Federal Reserve note. We're going to give you 50 euros. Would you be able to actually buy your dinner at Reagan with euros? It's a perfectly solid currency. It's an outstanding one. It holds its value. But it's not necessarily have utility in certain settings. And so two big barriers to utility and liquidity are, number one, and this was mentioned earlier, the banking rails. Making sure that you can move in and out of fiat currency back into something like a USDC or a Paxos stablecoin as quickly and seamlessly as possible. So Circle, for example, has spent years building out this network of reserve banks and partner banks for customers. In fact, we're pleased that Fifth Third is a part of that network. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing for barriers would be the blockchains themselves. USDC is natively on 28 different blockchains, but it's very difficult to move currencies among blockchains. We have something called the cross-chain transfer protocol. But again, if your stablecoin only works on one or two blockchains, again, that's another barrier point.
And maybe what I'll add is I maybe break it into two categories. One is some of the friction in the stablecoin world is how do you get back out of the stablecoin world? And he was describing a lot of those, especially when you live in a world where you have to move money 24/7. And so this adds quite a bit of complexity if you think about, well, someone shows up with a stablecoin, they want dollars, and it's 11:30 on a Friday. How do you make that possible? And there are plenty of examples of that. And then on the other hand, it could be, I'm in Asia and I'm putting money to work and I want to make sure that I'm able to get a stable coin. And, you're tied to U.S. banking hours. And so there's many different types of complexities around interacting with the traditional financial system while being able to have an effective stablecoin product that works. The second component is exactly what Kyle was describing, which is I'd say DeFi and crypto is still not abstracted away enough where it's solving just the problem as opposed to requiring you to actually understand the underlying mechanics. To date myself, I kind of think back to trying to get on the internet, and it was like trying to get on when there was this thing called Freenet. And you had to dial up and you put this receiver on a thing and you got some weird noises and you could get a little line of text that would come down. By the way, as absurd as that sounds, that's actually not that unusual when you kind of go through the DeFi ecosystem. And it really shouldn't be that way, or frankly, just in crypto in general. I think that'll all get abstracted away with great consumer products that allow you to solve a problem. Just like, no one knows how the phone works, or at least almost nobody does, but yet everyone knows how to use it. Crypto, blockchain, DeFi, stablecoins need to be just like that, which is, I think, what Dollar App is, for instance, doing, which is just making it so I can solve my problem. Is I want to be able to move dollars, I want to be able to hold dollars, I want to be able to have it happen instantaneously. It needs to be that simple at all times. There are so many different complexities depending on exactly what your use case is for stablecoins still. And so I think those things are all problems that can be easily solved. People are working really hard at solving them, and I think that they will absolutely get there. There are large firms like PayPal, which launched a stablecoin several years ago, and they were one of the first to come out and say they wanted to launch it being a scaled financial institution. We don't want to call it, yes, you're welcome. And I don't think we call them TradFi. They're a real fintech company, really huge in terms of their scale. And they launched a stablecoin. And that's an example of someone being able to take this technology and be able to
they don't want to be called TradFi anymore.
The traditional system and be able to try to solve problems in a way that you couldn't otherwise.
Bad word.
That's how I look at what can happen here.
Nobody wants to be traditional.
Next, I'm going to Keith. You got a solo one. What are some programmable features, maybe things like allow list, conditional transfers, and others that are going to make stables invisible in workflows in the next 6 to 12 months? Hopefully we can overcome some of these challenges.
Yeah, the whole goal, I was thinking about this the other day, and I remember about 20 years ago, you would talk to someone, a family member, and you'd say, well, we should go out and we should buy this thing. And someone would say, well, I'm going to go on the internet and buy it, right? We don't say that anymore. We just buy it. It's just assumed. And so we're going to get to a point where stable coins themselves are just floating around like any other form of electronic money, like credit cards, debit cards, most of which are, by the way, are not legal tender. And so what are some of the programmable use cases that sort of we're thinking about? Circle is focused on all use cases, but particularly thinking about enterprises, right? And so I'm often overseas. I'm talking to, let's just say, a Korean manufacturer who wants to sell goods overseas to Latin America. It takes 5 days for the money to move, and sometimes takes, is extremely costly. So you can imagine a scenario where all of this is built in, and the moment the goods leave the factory floor, through smart contract technology and programmability, the money is automatically sent, or when it's received on the other end. So trade finance and just trade in general is something that could be supercharged through stablecoins and the programmability that it offers. Another thing we're seeing is treasury functions, right?
We are
And
pumping.
even for scaled financial institutions, we have a large scaled financial institution that is actually using USDC, for example, to move money inside the institution across borders.
I might have to kill
And
this
so again,
trade.
a lot of that is
180%.
programmatic, and the features
80%
matter.
up.
I will
180.
say that in some ways, we need more than just programmable money. We
Oh,
also need
feels
the
good.
underlying rails to be enterprise grade. So one of the things that Circle is doing is we're reading the CPMI IOSCO paper, we're reading stuff from the BIS, and we're saying, what are the barriers to large enterprise use of blockchains?
That's what I've been saying. I know you've
so
been
we
saying
can
it
actually
too.
make programmability really effective. And so we're developing something called ARC, which is sort of an enterprise grade L1 blockchain that has, sub-second deterministic finality that makes it very, you send the money, boom, it's done. You don't have to wait. There's no probability. There's no 51% attack concern. Using something that's very stable like a USDC as gas, and other features as well, including privacy layers. So it's just very important to say you got to combine the programmability with the underlying infrastructure as well to really unlock these use cases.
If I can just jump in on that one. I think there's a lot to be done here. I think one point of encouragement for anybody who is building, like we have a fairly sizable business, essentially selling software, like subscription software to corporates to automate payment workflows. About a third of the total revenue the bank does annually now is attached to people who utilize software to eliminate some manual step, whether it's recon or payment scheduling or otherwise. There's a lot you can do with programmability that is technically better than people using bill pay services to schedule a payment, right? But it has to be much better in order for people to change the behavior. Like the law of good enough works against any new technology, because if the existing method works well and it doesn't cost much, and especially on the consumer side of the equation, most payment initiation is free in the US, you have to be able to demonstrate some significantly better value. So demonstrating programmability, showing people, hey, you can program the payment so that it moves consistent with your payment contract is not meaningfully better than just pre-programming your whatever sourcing software you're using to initiate an ACH instruction at the point in time when you've hit the date that the payment is due. You have to actually focus on the integration, right? That is the place where you can improve a step. So instead of having to pass contracts and have somebody sitting, in a bullpen somewhere working AP files, that there are agreements that are standardized at the time of the procurement that then pass straight through to the financial institution or the wallet provider that then automate. It's just that's the step we're going to have to take here, because just because we can doesn't mean anybody will.
So what you're saying is
All
there's a
right,
chance.
and then I think we have a follow-on here for Heath. What's actually production ready now for enterprises, and specifically around things like illicit activity detection, and where are false positives still going to bite us?
Yeah, so the whole area of making sure you're on something that's trusted, right, is in many ways critical for enterprise adoption, right? And enterprise is going to is going to be extremely hesitant to risk its reputation to go on a blockchain where potentially North Korea is a validator, right? And so there are a number of factors like that we're taking into account. So for example, ARC, the blockchain that we're creating, will actually have permission validators. So everyone will be vetted in advance. And also making sure that the institution that you're getting the digital assets from has an AML CTF program, it's compliant with the Patriot Act, all of those things matter.
Boo.
The good old Patriot. I thought
all right,
that
next
ended.
up, we're going to interoperability and orchestration. This one's for all of y'all, so feel free to jump in. Keep it clean out there, boys. And where is interop already good enough? And where is it brittle? What orchestration layer or layers are going to enable a truly tech-agnostic experience?
Actually, I can get started from the consumer standpoint. At the end of the day, it's not so expensive to maintain some liquidity buffers to orchestrate, because even today, like it's still pretty aggregated. Like the question is, what happens if we end up in one of these like ridiculous situations where it's so atomized, no? But right now, from the consumer standpoint, I would say we don't see that being a big issue. You need to hold some liquidity buffers, but again, no, like you don't really have FX exposure. You have some credit risk that you need to manage, but we haven't encountered that being a big problem. No, keen to see like on the scale side, how do you guys perceive it? No, but on our end, it hasn't been a big deal.
Given the interest that we expressed in cross-border payments, it's the on-ramps and the off-ramps. It's the point you made earlier about the need to cobble together your own ecosystem if you want to move money utilizing stablecoins today. The actual use of the rail is much easier than getting money in and then getting it out in another jurisdiction, ensuring that the person that you're paying has the ability to accept it and to convert it back to fiat. My big fear, I think there are lots of really interesting things that can be done with tokenized deposits, but that's the place where I think the interoperability issue is the biggest. If we can land on a handful of, call it standard stablecoin payment rails, I don't know that interoperability is a problem so much as it is just getting to a point where the adoption on both sides of the network, on the send and the receive side, are native as opposed to through a third party and then a transfer.
We're in a bit of a strange interregnum where the Genius Act has passed, and you can be forward-looking Genius compliant, but you aren't Genius compliant today. And so that's actually created a huge proliferation of stablecoin issuers from a white label side and otherwise. And so I actually think if you had a moment of risk where something could go wrong, it's probably now, between now and 18 months from now, because you have so many different firms that are operating in ways that may or may not end up looking like they've aged well. But I do think that once Genius comes into effect, when the rules are put into place and everyone is have to follow them, which I guess gets you all the way to 3 years from when it passed, you're going to have a clear set of rules, and that should create a level of fungibility that can be relied upon as long as the standards are widely enforced, and I think also adopted in a number of different international jurisdictions, so that you create this capacity where it is truly cash and cash equivalents. I think that's where we'll go. And so between blockchain and standards, you do create a capacity to have interoperability in a forward-looking basis. You don't today, because stablecoins still have counterparty risk to them, depending on exactly how they're constructed. Most of them still do. And certainly a lot of the new ones also do as well. And so that's where there's a real interesting dynamic that exists right now. I think that also, and this is really, I think, Tim's point, there is a lot of complexity around having to be able to manage that liquidity, because those are not the same liabilities. They're almost in some ways akin, though not the exact same thing as a deposit, because you have the counterparty risk related to them. I think that'll all get worked out over time, and we'll get to that end state where I think that will lessen maybe either the capital that you might have to hold against stable coins, the amount of risk limits that you would have to put into place, the counterparty capital charges that you might need to carry. But I don't think we're there yet. So we're getting there, but there's a lot more work to be done yet.
Maybe you asked about orchestration. I think, and this goes to sort of Tim's point about sort of not unsolving problems that have been solved. A lot of the domestic payment system works rather well. There are obviously improvements that can be made, but once you step outside U.S. borders, it becomes a lot more complex. So one example of orchestration is something we've created called the Circle Payments Network, where we have institutions on various sides that are orchestrating FX flows using what Governor Waller has called the stablecoin sandwich. But right now, to send money to Brazil from the United States or from the European Union to the United States, it can take up to 72 hours going through various correspondent bank accounts. We've been able to get that down to 72 seconds using basically fiat on either end and then the stablecoin rails in between. So it's a great example of where orchestration, as you asked the question, actually can make a difference to solve a problem that is a real barrier to use case. The other point I just want to think about is tokenized deposits. We've mentioned it a couple of times. There's a couple lines in the Genius Act that just gives a scant reference to it, but this country has never really thought about tokenized deposits and the potential impact on the banking system. And as a former regulator myself, I'd ask the question, I think you used the term, used 996 banks in the United States. Yeah. If in fact 5,000 banks in the United States, many of which are community and smaller banks, immediately overnight tokenized their deposits, they moved at the speed of the internet 24/7, as a bank regulator, I might be a little concerned about that, right? And so I think if we are going to go down the road of tokenized deposits, unlike stable coins that are backed one-to-one with very high-quality liquid assets, if we're using the fractional reserve banking system, which is subject to deposit insurance, the discount window, and essentially a government intervention model, and we're going to tokenize that and move it quickly through blockchains, I think more public policy work should be done.
Woo. Your breath.
Right, then
Nice
we're getting to
stuff
the last
right there.
question here before we open up for Q&A.
Basically,
This
government
is for all of you
control.
also, please jump in. Great tech always lets you do old things better and some new things that you couldn't do before.
Get
Could you all
outta
each
here,
please give one
Francisco.
example of a use case that you think are going to become
wrong.
possible using stablecoins in the next 1 to 2 years that are maybe not possible today? And maybe as a bonus if you want to get AI agents in there somehow. But y'all go for it.
I am.
I guess I can
am.
get started, but it was kind of mentioned already by Tim before. But the idea of having a large financial institution initiating a transaction on blockchain is literally a game changer, because you suddenly move into 24/7 money movement made instant, right? So I think that would be like the biggest change to expect on that side, I would say.
You just cuss.
No, I don't
I'm
think so.
really excited about the potential for fungible collateral that can move around the world and across exchanges and otherwise. We have a couple of clients who run large exchanges who are exploring that sort of mobility, and it would make a material difference to the institutional investors and counterparties that trade on those exchanges.
I think one of the interesting components is that if you really kind of look at the dollar on a first principles basis, it's basically a wrapper. It's kind of a wrapper today for government securities, maybe some gold, some other things that are on the Fed balance sheet. It's a wrapper, but essentially a stable coin is an even smaller subset of what the dollar is. It's basically only cash and cash equivalents, only T-bills, only overnight repo, and some bank cash. And you can imagine once you start having tokenized treasuries and tokenized repo, as Tim was saying, you can actually completely change the way in which the collateral mechanisms work for how you could run repo programs, how you'd be able to instantaneously be able to create a stable coin on chain. A lot of the frictional elements of stable coins start to disappear. It actually becomes quite democratized. And I think there's so many questions that come up around, well, you can't really have stable coins pay interest. And I think the Genius Act struck a good compromise there. But in some ways, I think that really just becomes a bit of a sideshow when you have tokenized treasuries, because you're then able to immediately swap in and out of something that's giving you yield into something that isn't giving you yield. And so then, you can have that artificial construct, which makes sense in some sense, but that's not really the ultimate end space for what stablecoins are going to look like, or even the financial system will look like, because you can have the underlying assets themselves be able to move just like a stablecoin moves.
One area you asked specifically about AI that I think about, and this may be beyond 12 to 18 months, but there are people right now that are thinking through these issues and working on them, is sort of the economics of AI itself, right? If I have a website, an encyclopedia and AI is visiting that website, calling data from it, it's possible in the future no one will visit my website anymore. So I'm a producer of data, I'm a producer of content, and at some point you've got to interact with the
113,
AI
yep.
and perhaps charge something. And I can't help but think
How's that long
agentic
looking?
payments plus programmable
It's
money, stable
it's
coins
juice.
could play
Okay?
a role
It is
in that
juiced.
whole new emerging economic system that we're still trying to figure out.
Is this where Ave
All
works?
righty, and now we'll jump into Q&A.
Friends are
Our
good.
first question here, of course, is coming from Anonymous. This one's for Charles and Heath. Fast forwarding a decade, how do you think proof of reserves will work, and how will it be different from how it works today?
Oh, nice. Proof of reserves.
Uh.
You mean people are going to have to actually
Well,
have
the
reserves?
good news is we've got the Genius Act. That'll be implemented. So we'll have the transparency that's there. But I think if you potentially combine that with AI agents and zero knowledge proofs, there could be something there as well. But right now, the Genius Act solves that through transparency, through audits. They're sort of the old-fashioned way. It's entirely possible there could be other ways of
low-tech,
making sure
dated
that
way.
those reserves are confirmed as well.
Zero knowledge proofs
Yeah,
is
the
the
way
answer.
it works today is, I think Circle and us, we do monthly attestations. We have KPMG, and they look at what's in the bank accounts, which is actually the hard part, and then they look what's on chain, and they say, yes, that matches up. And you could try to do that more frequently, but it's actually the complexity is not what's on chain, it's what's off chain. And how can you get that snapshot and be able to get it reliably? And maybe the way I was just answering the prior prompt is that when you start having the underlying assets on chain for the stablecoin, well, then it's very simple. It's like very easy to do that match and be able to see it completely directly in real time at all times. And so I don't think it's going to take 10 years to get there. I think the tokenized treasury market is already starting to grow, and it can be quite significant in a relatively short period of time. I could imagine in something like 3 or 4 years, a situation where maybe the percentage of your reserves for a stablecoin that are not held in on-chain format could be quite low. But ultimately, you have to have it be 100% in order to be able to really have it be 100% matched, same to same. But I certainly think we're going to get there.
All right, next one here is for large volume financial market settlements. What resilience features should stablecoins have beyond those required in the Genius Act? This one's for anybody.
Anybody? Bueller? Bueller.
Maybe the Genius Act is perfect.
All right. Awkward. First panel was better, I'll say.
All right,
I like
guess
Niles'
no one's got anything. Genius Act is perfect. There you go. Thank you, Senator Haggerty and team. All right, Chad, here's the question you were expecting, of course. With the problems last week, what went wrong with the minting process? Did the blockchain work as expected? And I guess for context, for those that don't know, I think last week PayPal for 24 minutes or thereabouts printed 300 trillion US dollars. And
They're
and then
going
unprinted
for
them.
We printed it, actually. We don't cast aspersions here. The mistake was entirely ours. Certainly, we didn't operate at the standards that we expect of ourselves. There's an interesting situation where you try to determine where does it make sense to be fully automated and where does it make sense to have manual interventions in order to be able to create additional levels of security. And in this case, our operational manual processes were put into place for a deliberate reason in terms of being able to create very secure cold minting processes. But it's something that we rarely use. And so that led to an error in how much was minted. We knew within a minute or two it all was contained on our system. It never left our system, which, by the way, should never diminish how seriously we take this. But it did, of course, lead to there being an overmint of a fantastically large number, and of course the unwind of it. I think that the importance of this, to me, is it underscores the value of the blockchain.
He is.
It actually shows the transparency that you can immediately have into what's going on. And so in this case, an operational error that was entirely internal to our systems is now immediately visible to everybody. So I'm sitting here, of course, talking about this and making it really clear about what we could do better. But that's important because that means you can have this level of transparency throughout the entire financial system over time. That's a really positive thing. It's of course painful to go through, but I think you could just imagine having a world where you would be able to see exactly what's happening in real time and being able to have that level of transparency to understand how firms are functioning, and that can create confidence in the financial system in a way that the opacity that exists today has really limited. And that's why you get accelerator effects, and that's why you get run on banks, is because you don't know what you don't know. And so you're never going to have a perfect world where everything is completely transparent, but the more transparency you have, I think the better the financial system will be over time.
All right, I think we have time for maybe one more question in here. And of course, this is a nice phone one for us to wrap it up. If stablecoin issuers can theoretically have Fed payment accounts themselves, what need is there for banks in the workflow?
Ooh. Oh, shit.
Well,
Why
there
do
is
we need you guys?
A big value in intermediation, right? And like if you don't have bank deposits, then the bakery perhaps cannot get a loan, and there's a massive value in that. And I think like anyone who's rejecting that value is not really understanding how the economy works. No? So of course there would be a lot of value for banks. No.
You just don't
And
understand.
perhaps this might be like a sort of Marxist view, no, but it still can eventually bring transactional value to cost to zero. And the margins get compressed in transactional business. Perhaps the implication would be that financial technology will be all about balance sheet in the end, right? So perhaps the question will be the opposite, and banks will be even more important.
You're going to get more important with it. Okay. Okay,
The-
buddy. They're laughing at him.
I don't know that, I think the point that you made, Fernando, that's dead on is I don't know how much people understand about the business, and not just the role that we play as a safekeeper of deposits, but as a provider of multiple payment services, as a lender, the role that we play in maturity transformation, which is important from an economic perspective, to your point. And I just think at the end of the day, all complex ecosystems require integrators. Okay, they just do, and they're, for the average individual, potentially short of healthcare, is no more complex, opaque, harder to navigate ecosystem than managing your personal finances. And the byproduct of that is, with the exception of people who live day to day, there will be values to bundling and to the build out of, there will be value to bundling and to the build out of services around the actual currency itself. Because if that was the case, then, for the last
W's
50
in the
or 100
chat for
years, we would have
Kyle.
just been carrying stacks of cash around in
That
wheelbarrows.
was awesome.
Right.
And maybe I'll add my 2 cents with 2 hats on. First, my Circle hat, then as a former regulator. So wearing my Circle hat, I mean, we put billions back into the banking system. It's really important to us that we're able to put money back into the banking system. So it is, in fact, continuing to do credit, generation, credit intermediation. And I think, we are very supportive of that. The last thing we want to do is have a situation where the banking system is disintermediated, right? Stable coins are meant to be a payment mechanism, meant to be a version of cash. Wearing my former regulator hat, there are, however, certain instances, and I witnessed those as CFTC chairman during the COVID crisis, where our clearinghouses in the United States, the large, important financial market utilities, that didn't necessarily have a Title VIII designation and therefore didn't have Fed accounts, found themselves awash with cash, tons of cash with variation in initial margin, with no place to put it. Because the banks, to argue your point, your point out there is the supplemental leverage ratio disincentivized banks to hold cash. And therefore, we had a scenario where the clearinghouses had all this cash on hand. Banks didn't want to take the cash, and we were in a major conundrum. So I would say there are instances where having a deposit-only account, not discount window access, not any kind of borrowing facilities, but just a safe place to put cash in certain circumstances would probably provide a stability backstop for the stablecoin industry.
I also think one of the important benefits of Genius and having payment stablecoins is that you can now separate fractional money, which I think is very important, from money that you're using in the payment system. And so having non-fractional money that is able to move through the payment system creates a capacity for there to be more resilience in financial crisis, where you can have accelerator effects or you can have run on banks. And when they were conjoined together, which they really had to be because of just the limitations from a technological standpoint, you had whole parts of the payment system that were locking up when certain banks were having problems. And actually having some capacity to have those not be totally intertwined can be very effective in times where I think there are systemic risks that really become endemic in the system. And certainly part of that could be having use of a Fed master account. And it doesn't even have to be necessarily being able to go into debit at the Fed. It's simply being able to have funds that you're able to put at the Fed. And so in that way, you can not necessarily disintermediate the banking system, but you can create a mechanism for intermediation to continue through the payment system, even when there are times of stress.
All right, actually, we do have a few more minutes. I misread the clock. So a couple more for y'all guys. Any thoughts from this group on how the issue of revocability might be addressed in the stablecoin ecosystem?
Come on, man.
Hey, a lot of
Probably
pressure.
for me. Yeah, so it's very important that transactions on blockchains are irrevocable. And as I said before, one of the things that the Basel Committee and others have said is an issue with certain blockchains is the fact that you have the possibility of having 51% attacks, and you have probabilistic settlement as opposed to final deterministic settlement. So no question that anytime something is on a blockchain, we really do need settlement finality. That's a separate issue than the one which is in a world of consumer payments where chargebacks have become an important part of the way that our consumer payment system works. Is there the ability to create some kind of opt-in as an application layer on a blockchain to facilitate chargebacks, right? To bring some of those great things that we have in the scaled financial system of today into the Web3 world. So that's the way I think it's an entire, if there is a need for something like that, it would be done through an application layer that everyone would opt into voluntarily, and at the same time preserving the irrevocable nature of the underlying blockchain transaction.
All right, going down the list here.
Go
for it.
I think there's a really interesting question on this one because given your point, like there are some use cases that are not amenable to being switched, right? I think one of the things that drives me nuts is whenever we try to compare the cost of accepting a stable coin to the cost of accepting a credit card payment, because if the decision on what sort of payment to accept was entirely in the hands of the merchant, right? They wouldn't be accepting credit cards today. The reason they accept credit cards is because people want to pay with them. And people want to pay with them because they want float or credit or rewards or the consumer protection associated with the ability to charge back a payment that you didn't make, right? So those are features of the product. We spent too much time on and those features require economics to be able to provide them, right? It's simple utility.
This guy's definitely like
the economics
tech
around
inventor
the payment,
for James Bond, the Q type character
then are
in all the
attached
movies.
to that, the provision of those sorts
you
of
take
features.
this pen.
My own personal view on this one is we could spend a lot of time to replicate the feature functionality of all the different legacy payment methods and get nowhere, because what would happen is the cost to accept a stable coin would have to go up in order to support all of these sorts of benefits. And in turn, you wouldn't see any sort of value shift. Whereas we have payments that move today in places where revocability isn't a requirement, right? It's not a valuable feature. And just mining those markets has got to be a huge TAM for people who are out there. So trying to get every rail to do everything doesn't seem to me to be the right long-term
113.3 right now on Bitcoin.
Given that the rail that exists, the tech that exists today, there's a massive capacity.
These
over
charts
time
are insane
to do
right
things
now.
where some of the things it can't do aren't a big problem.
Yeah, smash the likes for Federal Reserve pumping our bags.
All right, going next.
Thousands
on the
of
list
people
here.
watching right now.
All Are we
Only
more
400
likely to see
likes.
existing payment rails like SWIFT move to leverage stablecoins, or see new rails for banks to adopt?
Oh, good question. I like that one. God, this guy's the only one who talks.
I'm fond of, I think it's one of the A16Z folks, but the saying that the sort of battle for any market comes down to whether the incumbents get the innovation faster than the disruptors get distribution, right? And that's what you're going to see with all of the legacy payment utilities here is the legacy payment utilities have to find a way to rewire around new technologies, new protocols faster than the insurgents find financial institutions that are interested in riding on the rails. And I don't know that I would handicap that, but things that move large volumes have to be built to avoid hard right turns. And it means inherently they have to be slower, right? In this particular case, like our stance as a company has been to keep our options open. I tend to think that the insurgents may get the escape velocity faster than a lot of the incumbents are able to adopt the innovations in this particular market. But that's by no means settled.
So do you think XRP is going to replace Swift chat? Let us know. Yes or no?
All right. Another one for Tim. What's the net impact of stablecoin adoption on credit creation? Do stablecoins drain capital from banks, institutions that primarily extend credit?
They wouldn't drain capital. They would drain deposits, and deposits are the more relevant factor here because we hold $1 in capital for every $10 in loans that we make, right? And therefore, we need the deposits to be able to support the level of lending. That comes down to the rules that need to be written around anti-circumvention.
He says that so casually. We hold
know.
$1 for every $10 that we loan.
That
Big deal.
intention behind the law was to prevent stable coins from earning interest. It's not clear to me based on the behavior in the market that everybody intends to abide by those rules. And if stable coins are allowed to pay interest, they pose a threat that is equivalent to, but potentially far greater than money market mutual funds did when they were introduced many, many years ago. And that would have a direct impact on the ability, on credit formation. I think there are some clever strategies there. So to the point that Heath made earlier, circle round trips deposits back into the banking system. That's quite useful in terms of supporting the ability to form credit. But if my read is right and the intention of the law was to prohibit people from paying interest, we should just get about prohibiting people from paying interest, whether they call it rewards or anything else, right?
All right. Speaking of yield-bearing stablecoins, Heath, this one's for you, but others feel free to jump in. Why should or shouldn't we have regulated yield-bearing stablecoins in the United States?
Well, the answer is we do. They're called tokenized money market funds. And so that's the circle position, is that a stable coin is the equivalent of cash. We think the Genius Act got it right. Backed one for one. Anytime you're paying out and it's paying out interest, that obviously introduces more risk. But that said, we do think there's a need, obviously, for interest-bearing instruments, interest-bearing digital collateral. And so we've created, it's not available in the United States, but something called USYC, which does precisely that. But Circle's always taken the position that it's a security, it's a tokenized money market fund. And so I think those distinctions make a great deal of sense, and they're consistent with current law, including the Genius Act.
Great answer. We already have it. So you quit
I
trying to
closed my
find it.
I
long.
think we've actually made it through all of the questions.
Percentage? How'd you make
Bad.
what was
And I think we're probably coming in on time as well. So I think
200%?
we landed the plane successfully, gentlemen. Thank you all.
222%.
Thanks to Kyle and
I
all
like
the
it. Lucky
panelists.
numbers. 222.
So yes,
Huh.
you brought us in right
It
on
might still
time
keep
and
going,
actually just
though.
a minute early for lunch.
Chaos.
And I
All right, they're going to lunch. All right, we can pull down. Pull up the Bitcoin chart. Everybody's wanting us to see the Bitcoin chart. Smash the likes if you love the Federal Reserve pumping our bags. It's just crazy to me to think that the Federal Reserve is hosting this thing, and they're literally out there dunking on banks, talking about DeFi, asking them why we need them to exist at all. Shout out to Kyle. At first, I was a little bored until he started hitting those zingers, man. That was awesome. And shout out to Drew, by the way, 222% on a long during that
Oh,
process.
good.
Gotta love that. Feels good.
Felt good. I got stopped out last night, and then I went on the Twitter space with James Wynn and argued with him that we're going to go up today. And he was like,
Yeah.
looking for heinous downside. But I still want to have him on the show.
No,
We
and
had a
you
really
called
good
it.
conversation.
You called it in the Discord last night. If you guys aren't in there, I mean, obviously we've got a lot of very active traders in there. Drew, you do a really good job. John Dalton, really, if you just get in there and follow John Dalton's trade, he's an incredible trader, not just on Bitcoin. He trades altcoins. He trades metals. He's been crushing it. We've got some good stock stuff. So if you want to follow along with those trades, the link is in the description. Get in and check that out. It's free to join.
Yeah.
But yeah, super bullish. I mean, Bitcoin 113.5 right now just can't. It's just not stopping. I loved those questions Kyle hit him with right there at the end. And let me know in the chat. I guess let me know in the chat. Tell me what your takeaway was. Tell me what you think. I know we've got one of the smartest chats in all of crypto, so I love to hear what the Disco famous thing. Yeah, look at that candle. That's a
4-hour candle.
Yeah, that's the makings of a god candle right there. I mean, where did it open? Yeah, look at that. That's
It opened at 108, and we
sitting
ran
at-
by 5%
Wow.
within this 4-hour candle. So it's in the metrics, this is like
so freaking bullish, man.
it's a psyop. Like these metrics, they're changing the dynamics of how I'm used to trading, which is kind of crazy. But I was just looking at this level me and Kelly were talking about yesterday. We were below it, and I saw a chance for opportunity. I chose Aave to go after, just in the context of, this conflict between banks. I think is really well written up and talked about by the OCC chief here in this article. I actually want to bring up here. Jonathan Gould dismissing deposit flight fears as banking groups demand Congress to close the Genius Act loopholes, allowing for stablecoin yield. OCC chief talking about the material deposit impact for stablecoins would not happen in an unnoticed fashion, would not happen overnight. And they're talking about essentially top banking regulators being afraid of digital assets enticing people into crypto stablecoins rather than putting their money into banks for basically no yield.
Yes.
So this is a threat to the existing banking infrastructure, and they're having this soiree to try to figure out if they can coexist. It is interesting that this is actually happening because this is something that I told my father, told my mother, told all of my loved ones about in 2020, and they thought I was nuts.
I know. I've been saying that's what I'm saying. Watching this is so validating because this is what I've been talking about for such a long time. And they're literally out there saying it. There's lobbying against having people earn a yield on stable coins. And the guys like, these products exist, guys. Like, this is not a new thing. Like, the fact that you're trying to put a regulation to say we can't do this, basically what you're trying to do is stop us from competing with the products you already have because ours are better. Like, it's just, and it's clear to anybody that understands what's going on how much better this technology is, how much more opportunity it provides. I love this. Some of the chats rolling in here. Keep them coming, guys. I love this guy says, I love that the CEO of Fifth Third basically admitted they're a house of cards. Like, yeah, for every $1 we take in, we lend out 10 times more. And again, they don't even have to. It could be zero. They're making loans on nothing half the time. So yeah, they're definitely crushing, like technology is crushing a sector that has not innovated in an incredibly long time. I did want to hit a couple, I did see people talking. Oh, this was not the right, Avantis right here. Avantis, however you want to say it, crushing it today, up 26%. Same thing. Kita up 8% already on the day, recovering. So I just want to remind you guys how fast this sentiment changes. Everybody in crypto, all your favorite influencers and creators are going to flip back bullish now. Just remember last week when everything was down, the last 2 Fridays were been very painful, and everybody was saying the sky was falling, and we were out here telling you guys, look, it's still macro bullish. There's still a lot of things that are bullish. Do not get shaken out. Do not sell at the bottom. Actually, this is where we're buying. I know we have a very, very smart audience and a very smart chat. I know a lot of you guys did because you were putting it here in the chat. Let me know if you bought anything in the last 2 weeks, if you bought any crypto whatsoever, whether it was your favorite altcoin, Bitcoin, Chainlink, Ethereum, Morpho, Aave, any of it. put it in the chat, because I know we have a smart audience here. But I know there's also people that are newer to this. There's people that haven't been following for such a long time, and you are down and you do get scared. You probably did buy the top when Bitcoin was at 120 and all these altcoins were up, and they start pulling back, and you hear people saying the 4-year cycle is over, it's done. We're, like we're going back into a bear market, and you get shaken out. And so I understand that. That makes sense. But I'm just want to remind you guys that, if your investment thesis doesn't change, then why are you changing your actions? If what you have to have conviction when you're an investor, you have to be able to separate your emotions of the day, of the week, of the month from your logical thought process as to why you got into this, why, whether it was Aave, whether it was Morpho, whether it was Chainlink. Nothing that I see has shaken my resolve in Chainlink whatsoever. So if the price goes down, it's a buying opportunity. Same goes for Bitcoin. Nothing has shaken my resolve in the fact that Bitcoin will be over $1 million in the near future and over $10 million in the not too distant future. That will happen. And anytime I see price pullbacks, I'm buying. I'm buying heavy, especially at key levels, like I did under 80K, like I did when we went back to 108, 110. Again, you can see some of these ranges. You can see where the volume is. We talk about it on this channel all the time, but I just want to, we do zoom in on the chart a lot and look at the days and the 4-hour, and, because we do talk
very
about
guilty
trading.
of that. Very.
All of us are. When we get up and we think about this stuff every single day, you're gonna overthink it. You're gonna potentially overtrade it. You're gonna overanalyze it, and that's kind of the result of doing this every single day. But I just want to remind you guys, the macro for this industry, for this space, has never been better. The risk reward for coming into Bitcoin, for coming into DeFi, for coming into real world assets has never been better when it comes to what's happening around the world with trade wars, with the lack of counterparty trust. Because that's really, at the end of the day, that's a lot of what they were talking about in that conference is, who can we trust? Do we need third-party intermediaries? Again, I just love that he just said, like, so why do we need banks? And they were like,
And the crowd, you heard the crowd laughing after he's like, I mean, we're going to be actually better off because of this, It's
right,
just so
right.
crazy.
You wouldn't get it. You wouldn't get it. That's basically there.
You just don't understand. Okay. You just don't understand. Stay back. Well, I feel absolutely incredible after watching that.
Me too. That
It's
feels
been a heck of a week. Honestly, the last 2 weeks have been just absolute whiplash on the markets, but you know what? I'm having fun about it. Is that the fellow that was talking right there with the
if
5
you guys,
o'clock shadow?
yeah, this is Kyle Samanai, I guess is how you say it. If you guys don't know who he is, again, co-founder, managing partner of Multicoin Capital, and this is what they do: stable coins, DeFi, RWA. You got some DPIN in here, but really, like, this is their wheelhouse. He was. I just think he did a really good job. I do think the first panel was even better. It was obviously I like it because I'm a DeFi guy, but having Jitto and Aave and Fireblocks and Chainlink and all those people up there, just gets me fired up.
They said
Love these
Morpho,
prices,
man.
I know. I can't.
Morpho,
Morpho, yeah. Which again, to pull it full circle, Morpho again. I believe in a lot of ways why we love Aerodrome and Morpho, because that is the base ecosystem, which ties back to Coinbase. I do think Coinbase will route most of their capital through those two things. Lending and borrowing, like Aave, is Morpho on base, and decentralized trading is Aerodrome on base. You can kind of read between the lines with Coinbase Ventures. That's more or less where they want to take all of their trading, is to decentralized trading. The acquisition of Echo is huge. Very bullish for the coin stock. I haven't even looked at where the levels are lately, but again, if you want to have, like, I was talking to somebody the other day about potential diversification. It's like, why would I want to diversify out of the fastest growing emerging sector?
Like, what do I sell into? It's like, they're
Well,
going
I
to
mean,
tax me more and more on real estate. Insurance is going up.
That's where I was going. I think my diversification out of Bitcoin would be into like coin stock, which is obviously still tied to this industry. So, or mining stocks and some of those sorts of things. So, love to see it. Great hanging out with all of you guys. Please smash the likes, tell a friend. This is how you get the word out there. Obviously, we do our best to bring you this information in a non-biased way. Our mission here is to help you find financial freedom through crypto, and we want to make it easy, attainable, and understandable for all of you guys. That's why we put this energy and effort in. I know most of you have, or a lot of you have already achieved that. If you are new here, jump on board. There's a lot of people in the chat. There's a lot of people in the Discord, as well as all of us who come on and do this content that are very invested in seeing this new, brighter future. It is great to have a world of hope with all the chaos and all the calamity and all the sadness that's out there today. Focusing on the positive things in the world, like Bitcoin. And again, go hope.com. If you guys don't know this, hope.com is a lot. Michael Saylor MicroStrategy owns it. They've invested a ton into organizing that in a really easy way. So go check it out. Send hope.com to a friend. Hand somebody a book of Internet of Money. I saw another Andreas Antonopoulos clip, which he doesn't get as much coverage today as he used to, but we need to get that going again. Any last thoughts, Drew, before we end it?
Yeah, I mean, with all the cultural problems that we have, huge partisanship within the United States, I think the underlying problem is that the Federal Reserve is stealing the average person's future away from them by irresponsible monetary policy and printing. What's coming over the next 10 years is going to dwarf what we saw in flu season, and you get the crypto at the price you deserve. So we're looking at this being told literally from Fed governors and leaders of the industry exactly where this is all going. I'm locked in. I'm super excited that we just had literal validation from Federal Reserve Board. If banks are scared, I'm on the right path. So I'm feeling absolutely wonderful about it, and gonna go enjoy some barbecue food and some sunshine. I'm
There
really
you go.
loving it though, man.
I love comp. I love curve. There's definitely a lot of players in the DeFi space. So yeah, don't hate on that comment there whatsoever. We'll see you guys soon. Stay tuned. We'll check back in this afternoon after more pumps. We love you all. We'll see you at the top.